war. Maybe somewhere there is someone who can think, well, this is the moment to get everyone around a table. I wish them luck and strength if that's what they're going to try and do, because this is a very scary situation. We'll talk about a bit more about that in the next sort of 10 minutes or so and take your calls about it as well. But just very worried about the sort of, the risk that this really just escalates beyond anyone's control. And maybe we're kind of there. I really hope we aren't. Here, big story, of course. We were talking about it on Friday. NSFAS, the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, and Dr. Bladen Zamande, the Minister of Higher Education, giving us more details on why he's taken the decision to dissolve the board. And he says the board could not perform its basic functions, wasn't actually making the payments it's supposed to make to students. He also says, and this is important, he says, in December, he requested the board to remove the companies that couldn't make the payments, to remove the service providers, and they didn't do it. Now, I'm sure that somewhere there'll be some sort of argument around whether a minister can order a board. He says he requested. It seems clear to me that if you make a request because the system isn't working and nothing changes and you're still using the old system that doesn't work, well, then I think you do have to take action. And it seems that is the case here, that action has been taken. I know there'll be questions around whether it could have been done earlier. I think there might also be quite cynical questions perhaps around if you keep someone in place who makes a little bit of money for each payment they make and you keep them in for 4 months, well then do they make a lot more money? I don't know. That might be too cynical. You tell me. But very important there, and we'll get more reaction for you around that. A lot going on around the elections, of course. There's no load shedding again today, and Eskom saying it'll sort of do its next update on Wednesday, which means that they're kind of hoping there'll be no load shedding, I presume, at least until then, maybe for another week. Today would be day 19 of no load shedding. Julius Malema, the leader of the EFF, reacting to that. He says load shedding will come back after the elections. And I know, again, that phrase, cynicism, that will be around that. Let's sort of see what happens. We know, and the ANC said that load shedding before the local elections affected their share of the vote. So let's see. President Cyril Ramaphosa was on the campaign trail over the weekend. He spoke, you heard him in the bulletin too, about the situation with Iran and Israel in the Middle East, and saying we sort of warned about this. This is the big risk, the big fear about what could happen. The DA still, it seems, having big arguments with smaller parties, and smaller parties having arguments with the DA about the Western Cape. And I mean, sometimes I think a person much older than me once took me aside and said, during an election, you see people who really are, who they're really scared of, and they attack who they're really scared of. In other words, who they're going to take the votes from. So, it's all about that. I thought that was interesting. And then I think what's going to be the dominant story this week, and we'll talk more about it, is the Electoral Commission in Umkhonto weSizwe. As we were on air on Friday, came confirmation that the IEC is appealing that decision that former President Jacob Zuma is eligible to be a parliamentary candidate for MK. That's based, of course, on the sort of constitutional provision. We still don't have the Electoral Court's reasons. So quite brave in a way to appeal without the reasons. But the Electoral Commission, they say that this is because they need clarity and they need certainty for future elections too. And MK, being very angry at that, they want Janet Love to resign because she's a commissioner there, because she said back in January that Zuma was not eligible. So there's a lot going on in this story. I mentioned last week, and I told you very briefly the story, it was reported in News 24 at the time, that we've all been talking about police officers and guns and using them. And I told you the story about what had happened in Soweto over the last weekend, where SAPS officers, so South African Police Service officers, had stopped a young man who was driving very recklessly. And they sort of chased him to his house. When he got to his house, he jumped out of his car and he went in, and his mother came out. And his mother said, "What's going on here?" And they said, "We want to arrest your son." And she says, I'm a Joburg Metropolitan Police officer. I'm going to get my gun. And she went to get her gun, and then she was shot dead by the SAPS officers. I mean, it's a sort of cautionary tale of too many guns, and it's just, there's so much going on in this story. And there was a memorial service for her over the weekend. Nombulelo Mthimkhulu was her name. Nombulelo Mthimkhulu, obviously. Sorry about that. So she passed away, and I know that the head of the and she, it seems now, is the 4th Joburg Metro Police officer to be shot dead by a South African Police Service officer. I think that's since the JMPD was formed, because I know there's been one other case that I could remember, so there's clearly been 2 others. But it's just a cautionary tale of what's been happening and what happens when there's sort of too many guns. And I mean, each of these stories will have its own story, its own details. but just really, there's a family left without a mother. She was shot 3 times in the back, by the way, which might be important in the investigations. I don't know. And then I must just mention this: the Benny Linn. Come on, Stephen. Benny Linn cough syrup. There's a recall. The South African Products Health Regulatory Authority, SAPRA, they're recalling it because, and this is the batch that expires at the end of April 2024. So it expires now. If you've got that Benny Linn cough syrup, there's batch numbers you can look up on the internet. But if it expires now, then take it back to the pharmacy now. Don't leave it there for someone else to use. At the very least, take it out and pour it down the drain, but don't let anyone else use it, okay? That would be my advice. It's the Benny Linn cough syrup that expires now. I think it's the raspberry-flavored one. And this is after a warning from Nigeria, where they've had certain cases, and they've issued a recall there, and I think our people are reacting to that. So very important there. All right, you know how to get in touch. 086 000 2032. Your SMS 41391. You tweet SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes. Send your WhatsApp voice notes to 0614 104 107. What's on your mind this morning? Good to hear from you. 16 minutes after 6.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
And Musa, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
It's not often you have to have international news so prominently in your bulletin, but the situation with Iran and Israel and the UN Secretary General saying now's the time to step back from the brink, I think that's going to be a big story over the week.
It definitely is going to be. So we will be having reaction following Iran's drone and missile attack on Israel. It's its first ever attack actually on the country.
Yes, I'd forgotten that, actually.
Yeah.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. So with South Africa also calling for restraint of all parties, and correctly so, comments by the UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres saying that the people of the Middle East are actually facing a real danger of a devastating full-scale conflict.
Very scary. Here is Ace Magashule in court today.
Definitely he is, along with his co-accused. So the corruption case against the former ANC Secretary General, Ace Magashule, and his co-accused gets underway in the Free State this morning. It relates to the alleged irregular awarding of the 255 million rand asbestos roof removal contract in the Free State, and that happened in 2014. So 18 accused, that's including companies that are facing more than 70 counts of corruption and money laundering.
I always find it interesting when a trial starts, you get to actually see the evidence. Everyone stops shadowboxing and you get to actually see the real evidence if there is any. And this is what I think will happen today, is we'll start to hear the evidence.
Yeah. The Minister of Education, Science and Innovation, Bladen Nzimande, yesterday addressed the media on his decision to dissolve the NSFAS board and to place the institution under administration. So we will be looking at the outcome of the briefing as well as reasons for his decision to dissolve the board and place NSFAS under administration. He has explained how the board failed to deliver on its mandate. And just lastly, AfriForum is challenging the Basic Education Laws amendments, and the lobby group wants the National Council of Provinces to revise the Basic Education Laws amendments. This is to allow SGBs to determine and authorize language policy in their designated schools.
Language policy was always going to be challenged in the end, wasn't it? And Musa, thank you very much indeed. We'll be listening on the radio 18 minutes after 6.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Let's have a look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane, cloudy, isolated showers, thundershowers, 13 and 21. Johannesburg, cloudy, isolated showers, thundershowers, 11 and 19. Vereeniging, cloudy, isolated showers, thundershowers, 11 and 19. Bombela, cloudy, isolated showers, thundershowers, 14 and 23. Polokwane, partly cloudy, 13 and 23. Mahakeng, cloudy, scattered showers and thundershowers, 14 and 20. Vryburg, cloudy, scattered showers, thundershowers, 12 and 22. Mangaung, cloudy, scattered showers, thundershowers, 9 and 19. Kimberley, partly cloudy, scattered showers and thundershowers, 12 and 22. Uppington, partly cloudy, 15 and 31. Cape Town, fine, a light to moderate southerly wind, 18 and 25. George, cloudy, isolated showers and thundershowers, a light to moderate southeasterly wind, 15 and 19. Gqeberha, cloudy, isolated showers and thundershowers, a moderate to fresh easterly, 16 and 23. East London, cloudy, widespread showers and thundershowers, a moderate to fresh northeasterly wind, 17 and 23. eThekwini, cloudy, scattered showers and thundershowers, a moderate northeasterly wind, 19 and 26. Richards Bay, cloudy, scattered showers, thundershowers, a moderate northeasterly wind, 18 and 27. And Pietermaritzburg today, morning fog patches, otherwise cloudy, scattered afternoon showers and thundershowers, 15 and 25.
The cost of living crisis is real. Here's what one OUTsurance client did about it.
I'm Amy. I'm 26 from Kenilworth. When I got my 2022 Ford EcoSport, the immediate thought was to buy an OUTsurance, and I pay only 819 Rand per month. No insurers were able to beat or match the premium that I'm currently paying.
Want a car insurance premium that will blow your mind? SMS out to 30754 now for a quote and to find out about included benefits like panic assistance that sends the nearest medical or armed response unit to you wherever you may be 24/7. Here's Yusuf.
45 years old from Tygerberg, Western Cape. I pay 700 Rand for my Polo 1.6 2021 model. If you haven't called OUTsurance yet, definitely get in touch.
Give it a go. SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. OUTsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's, and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
I'm Sindisiwe Chikunga, the Minister of Transport in South Africa. Our nation is not where it was 30 years ago. From a modest 7,200 kilometers of national roads in 1998, we have expanded to an impressive 24,160 kilometers today. The N2 Wild Coast, a testament to massive road infrastructure investment, creating thousands of jobs, reducing travel times, and connecting communities. We are collaborating with other spheres of government to enhance safety and quality of our roads. We have manufactured over 240 new trains right here in Mzansi using local skills and materials. Welcome Stimela Sabantu, offering an affordable transport alternatives.
Ready Steady Cook South Africa. The Thriller Minute Daily Treat is sure to spice up your Monday to Friday menu from Monday 18 March at 7 p.m. If you and someone you know think you're ready and steady to cook along the esteemed chefs on this juicy television show, you can WhatsApp the producers on 068 675 2542. Channel your inner 5-star chef with Ready Steady Cook. Weekdays at 7 p.m. only on
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international news.
22 minutes after 6, good morning. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has told leaders in the Middle East it's time to step back from the brink to try and avoid a full-scale conflict in that region after an emergency meeting of the Security Council overnight. On Saturday, Iran launched a series of missile and drone attacks on Israel. Israel says it was able to prevent anyone from being hurt or killed using its missile interception systems, but that American and British forces also helped to intercept the attack. As I understand it, Jordan also shot down Iranian missiles that flew over its territory. Iran had warned it would retaliate against Israel after Israel refused to confirm or deny that it was responsible for an attack on an Iranian consulate in Syria that killed 7 people. Professor Abel Eerstehuizen is a professor of strategy at the Faculty of Military Science at the University of Stellenbosch. Professor Eerstehuizen, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
The attack that Iran launched, a planned attack, presumably retaliation for what Israel is accused of doing in Syria, and yet no one was hurt, as I understand it. Was that deliberate? Did Iran do this in a way to, I think as one report puts it, maximize the spectacle, but not actually kill anyone?
Well, that's an interesting way to put it, and I totally agree with that. The Iranian response to the Israeli attack was deliberate. They were very vocal about it. And I think this one should also view against, a message to their domestic audience. It had as much to do with their domestic audience as with Israel and the strategic setup in the region. It was absolutely no surprise. I don't view it as an escalation of the conflict per se. And it was definitely not to provoke Israel. It was definitely not to provoke the U.S. They were very deliberate in their communications. And in fact, the U.S. and Iran communicated via the Turkish diplomatic channels about the attack. And of course, the West had details about the attack. Intelligence detail about the attack. I have no doubt that the West knew precisely what this attack is going to be. And in a way, the West and Israel prepared themselves for the attack, and they dealt with the attack. And 99% of of the missiles were shot down. So, yeah, I don't see this as a huge escalation of the war in the region per se.
It is, I think, the first time Iran has ever attacked Israel directly. Does that matter? And how does Israel respond from here then? Does it do nothing?
Yeah, that's one of the arguments that I've heard. It was, of course, a direct attack from Iran, but I mean, Iran has been involved in the support to Hamas, the Houthis, the Syrian regime, Hezbollah. It has been responsible for a lot of the conflict we've seen in the region over the last more than a year almost. The fact that Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the Sunni Muslim countries actually assisted Israel and the Western countries here is also saying quite a lot about the power relations in the Middle East. King Abdullah of Jordan opened not only its airspace, but it shoot down the missiles as well. So I think in the region in general, there's a discomfort with the role that the Iranians are playing in the region. So an escalation, no, a regional war. Well, it fit into what we have seen in the region since October last year and even before that.
And very quickly, if you can, in the end, the way to sort of de-escalate all of this is still a proper ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, and those talks will still continue, and we don't know really what's going on there.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see an escalation here. I don't think Israel is going to respond. The way that the Iranians communicated this attack was a clear reaction to what Israel did in Syria, and they had to respond to that. Their domestic audience demanded that from them. I don't see an escalation here, and I think the biggest challenge here for us is to get Israel and Hamas to sit down to talk about what is going to unfold in future in Gaza. We need to find a solution to the problem and get Israel out of Gaza. That's the immediate challenge, and I don't think it has changed that reality in any way.
Professor Abel Eerstes, I really appreciate the time. Thank you. Professor of Strategy at the Faculty of Military Science at Stellenbosch University. 27 after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, what's happening with the Nedbank semis?
Oh, it delivered again this weekend. We've got Chippa United taking on Orlando Pirates. It's a sizzler of a matchup. And this is after Chippa had a 2-0 away win against TS Galaxy at Mbombela Stadium. Stellenbosch FC stunned SuperSport United 4-0 with their quarterfinal victory at Dani Craven Stadium over the weekend. They were drawn out to meet Mamelodi Sundowns. So Chippa and Stellies have home ground advantage. Dates and venues for the semi-finals will be announced by the PSL later. In the meantime, SABC Sport can reveal that Richards Bay have been handed a transfer ban by World Football governing body FIFA with immediate effect. According to their investigation, the organisation has concluded that the DStv Premiership side failed to honour their financial obligations towards Kenyan international Ovela Ochieng, despite a mutual agreement to do so. Action elsewhere, Arsenal's Premier League title hopes were dealt with a huge blow by Unai Emery, who returned to his former club, stunning them. Aston Villa had a 2-0 win at the Emirates, while Liverpool suffered a major blow to their Premier League title hopes. They were shockingly beaten 1-0 by Crystal Palace at Anfield. In the meantime, a brace by Andreas Pereira ensured Fulham's third win on the road in this Premier League season. They beat West Ham United 2-0. Cricket action, the Dolphins crushing the Western Province by 8 wickets and 53 balls to spare in their Cricket South Africa T20 Challenge match. All happened at Newlands in Cape Town yesterday. The visitors reached 99 for 2 after 11.1 overs to secure a bonus point after dismissing the home side for just 96 in 17 overs after Kyle Verreynne had won the toss and elected to bat first. In the meantime, MS Dhoni celebrated his 250th game for the the Chennai Super Kings with a 20-run victory over their biggest rivals, the Mumbai Indians, despite a Rohit Sharma ton. And finally, golf, the world number one, Scottie Scheffler, winning his second Masters in 3 years. The overnight leader Scheffler beat out the impressive Masters debutant Ludwig Aberg by 4 shots for his second green jacket. Here's Scheffler.
It's hard to put into words how special this is. It's been a long week, a grind of a week. The golf course was so challenging, and to be sitting here wearing this jacket again and getting to take it home is extremely special. Tried not to think about golf, but it was increasingly difficult. But you know, they were great support for me this morning, it was a long morning, but it was well worth it. I'm glad to be sitting here now.
More sport on Sunrise, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Glad to have you with us here on SAFM Sunrise this morning. We will be talking about Ekurhuleni and their funny call centre. Well, funny, you'll find out in a few minutes. You're with SAFM leading the conversation. Good morning at 6:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, Israel's ambassador to the UN has told the Security Council that Iran's aerial assault against its territory crossed every red line and that Israel would defend its future. After more than 2 years on the pre-trial roll, the trial of the multi-million rand asbestos roof removal scandal will get underway in the Free State High Court today. 18 accused, including companies, are facing more than 70 counts of corruption and money laundering. And the United Nations has called for greater humanitarian assistance to help the huge numbers of people who are fleeing Sudan each day as the country marks 1 year since the start of a war between its army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very good morning. Quite slow coming in from Lenasia, Protea Glen this morning. The N12, a heavy backlog if you're Joburg bound, approaching the Golden Highway exit at Eldorado Park. Just a heads up, the N1's looking fairly slow as well this morning, coming out of Pretoria down to Joburg, slow already from Brockfontein all the way down through to New Road. And the R21 is queuing at the first set of roadworks you get to on your way to the airport in the Clayville area. Also, a left lane closure on the N1 coming out of Soweto just before the Albertina Sisulu off-ramp to Maresburg, and there is some slow-moving traffic there. Southern parts of KZN, the 620 route right through central Margate is closed this morning due to flood damage sustained in the construction area with the heavy rains overnight last night. There is quite a backlog of traffic in that Margate area already. It is the main drag through central Margate, which is currently closed off, and you can imagine how disruptive that's going to be. Cape Town today looking okay on your major routes, all fairly static, getting busy. Certainly the N2 from the airport through to Mowbray Main Road looking heavier than it normally would this time of morning. And Baden-Powell Drive along the coast has been closed again because of protesting at the bottom of Khayelitsha. The road is closed between Meway and Walter Sisulu Road, and that's going to put some diverting pressures, particularly along Jafta Masemola as you head that way into the local divert through Khayelitsha. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
With Intaleng Lachela. Intaleng, good morning. How are you doing this Monday?
Morning, Stephen. Happy Monday. I'm well, thanks.
How are the Asian markets this morning? How did the US end?
So before we take a look at how markets are doing today, let's just recap on Friday's close. Now, local markets had another subdued finish, with the all share closing flat, up 0.01%. US stocks, meanwhile, tumbled following a mixed start to earnings season. There's also been worries about potentially escalating tensions in the Middle East, further pushing investors to look for safer places for their money. So we've seen assets like gold spiking, trading under last week's record high at $2,300 as traders dump equities for safe havens. The same kind of sentiment has filtered through to Asian markets, those stocks kicking the week off on a bad note in negative territory as investors assess those geopolitical tensions. Now, in the currency scene, we're seeing further weakness when it comes to the rand on the back of a stronger greenback. It's now nearing the 19 rand mark to the dollar as it trades at 18.84.
And then the US earnings season's kicking off. People looking at bank results.
So US earnings season kicked off on a mixed note. A number of big banks released first quarter earnings. We had JP Morgan, Citibank, as well as Wells Fargo. all three banks sort of startled markets, recording a slide in net interest income. Now, Stephen, this is a very important measure as it measures the difference between what banks earn on their assets and what they pay out on their deposits. Now, a number of analysts raised concerns about this, saying that operating in a high interest rate environment is proving to be tough even for the banking sector. Now, that industry has always been known to shoulder the impact of these rates better than other industries, but the cracks are starting to show as that higher for longer sentiment hits.
And then Canal Plus, they've upped their stake in MultiChoice. This is getting very interesting.
Right, this deal has kept traders on their toes and is said to be the biggest merger and acquisition deal in South Africa so far this year. Now, as we wait for the takeover of MultiChoice to sort of be completed, French company Canal Plus has been taking advantage of the DSTV owner's current share price. For the takeover, Canal has offered 125 Rand per share. Now, this is under the price it's trading at. On Friday, at the close, the share was 117 Rand. And so as deliberations take place, the French company has snapped up an even more of MultiChoice's shares, taking its stake from roughly about 36% to 40%. Of course, this is making it the company's biggest shareholder and further underlies Canal Plus's intent to take control of MultiChoice.
Ntale Nglechelep, thanks very much indeed. Back, of course, in an hour's time. More business through the day here on SAFM.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
Russ Advocate Sipho Montula from the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs at UNISA. Good morning.
Steve, refreshing morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
We forget sometimes about how important this conflict is. The war in Sudan is now a year old.
That is quite true, Stephen. And what we are seeing now, beyond the international funding conference that is planned by the US and other international partners in terms of raising funds, today also, the issue is the issue of food security that has also affected the conflict in Sudan since April 2023. We know that there's been two characters who appear on it, General Abdullah Fattah al-Burhan, as well as General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who have been at the face and the voice of this conflict. This conflict has also caused thousands of people being killed, almost 8 million, Stephen, who forced to flee their homes to the neighboring Sudan. Now, we know the AU has tried, IGAD has tried, Saudi Arabia, the USA has tried. So we are hoping that 1 year later, there should be some progress in ending this conflict in Sudan. Hence, I said that this conflict also has this a feature of now food insecurity that is creeping in, that people are lacking food as the warring parties are still going on and without any ceasefire, Stephen, because like I said, you have international donor conference, but you still have two warring parties and the generals not willing to reach each other on this conflict.
And then the European Union promising to loan Egypt $1 billion. What's this for?
Stephen, Egypt has been having crisis, even if despite that they have elections and they've been trying by all means to deal with the crisis. But remember, Stephen, the crisis in the Middle East also, in Gaza, it has also affected Egypt in terms of dealing with this humanitarian crisis. The repercussions of the war in Ukraine also has affected Egypt. So they've been borrowed almost 5 billion euros in loans by the EU, by the European Union, to stabilize their economy as a country. And like I said, Stephen, there are push and the pull factors that has pushed Egypt to go and ask for this package to also deal with the issue of African people who are moving from one country to the other. The migration issue also is affecting Egypt, how to balance it. And at the same time, like I said, the conflict in the Middle East is causing Egypt to be in this crisis.
And then in Niger, hundreds of demonstrators taking part in that protest against the presence of foreign forces there. This is also about the US.
That is quite true, but we thought they will be against France or they'll be against other European countries, Stephen. But it's the US. You have France, that Niger has pulled out its military relations, but also Niger moving towards Kremlin, like I've said, towards Russia. Now, over this weekend, the ordinary people in Niger were even protesting against what they call the foreign forces presence in Niger, particularly the armed forces of the U.S. who have been in that country. And remember, the post-military coup issues, Stephen, they've affected Niger a lot. Hence, we have this issue that the people of Niger, they don't want to see the Americans, they don't want to see the French, but they are moving towards Russia. And that's why we have the popular protest by the community. But at the same time, you might say there's a military influence there to say we don't need the Europeans, we don't need the USA or France, we are moving towards Russia now.
And then in the DRC and Benin, 12 people were killed after heavy rain.
Very sad story, Stephen. Yesterday, we picked up that in the eastern DRC in Beni, almost 12 people were killed, 50 people are missing after heavy rain that caused a collapse of one of the rivers in the southwest of the DRC. This is one area, SG, that it has been affected by landslides, by floods in Beni, and that's why also the conflict is exacerbating both in the eastern DRC and in the southwest of the DRC. But humanitarian aid is assisting at the same time, Stephen, coming from both the neighboring countries, but particularly from Kinshasa. It takes fast even to assist those people in the eastern DRC. More so we have a conflict, but we hope that the issue of poor planning, Stephen, in some of these areas is done by also the multinationals who have been looting the minerals in the DRC, but not looking at such issues when you have uncertain climate conditions like the landslide in the eastern DRC.
And then in our archives, this day, 15th of April, 1958.
Almost 66 years ago, Stephen, I've always said it on the show, that builds what we call Africa Liberation Day. On this day, Kwame Nkrumah convened a first conference of the independent African states in Accra. And this day was also known as African Freedom Day in Ghana on April. Stephen, 1958, it leads us to 1963. So most African countries during this month of April, Stephen, they celebrate their freedom or their Independence Day. Hence, it starts with the African continent and it goes with other African countries that we'll deal with this week and the coming weeks. As we are saying, Stephen, we are celebrating the Africa Freedom Month in South Africa, and also we say Asante Sana to our listeners as we are observing the Freedom Month in South Africa.
Russ Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you very much indeed. Back, of course, with us tomorrow morning is from our continent through the day here on SFM, 18 minutes to 7.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Well, lots on the go at the moment. Of course, the situation with Iran and Israel, big story this morning. Also, conversations around Umkhonto weSizwe. They're sort of really very frustrated, I think, with the Electoral Commission's decision to appeal that ruling of the Electoral Court. They're going to the Constitutional Court. We still don't have the reason, so that's one of the issues that we need to see. Issues around load shedding as well this morning. You know, the number 086 000 2032. And then I think a conversation that we actually need to have, which is at the moment, if you want to leave school, you have to have finished grade 9. Is that the right age? We'll have a mediated conversation around this later, but, you know, should we maybe say, actually, you've got to be 16, 17 before you leave? Does that just disrupt other learners if people stay when they don't want to? You know, how do we manage that? I think, you know, when we lose half our learners between grade 1 and matric, really that's a conversation we need to have. Let's go to Percy and Matlasana. Percy, hi, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Stephen. How are you, my brother?
I'm well, Percy. Go for it.
Thank you, my wife. I'd like to thank SAA for intervention of the issue of CFO here in Matlosana. Last week, Friday, CFO was suspended.
Oh, really? Were they? Who did the suspension? Was it the mayor or the council?
The mayor was resigned on Thursday.
Oh, sure.
The CFO has been suspended, I don't know, until further notice. So I would like to thank SAA for intervention.
All right, Percy, I don't know if we did anything, but sometimes just raising it on this platform does get a reaction. That I can tell you. Percy and Matlason, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. And look, we intervene where we can, but as always, we can't make promises. You know how difficult it can be. Voice notes coming through this morning as well on 0614 104 107. Mainly at this stage, of course, around the situation in the Middle East.
Honestly, is it okay for Israel to retaliate? But it's not good for Iran to do the same. America, Britain, Germany, they're not being fair to Iran. The Iranian embassy was attacked. and Iran is retaliating. But for Israel, they are allowed to do whatever they want.
Yeah, series of interesting questions coming out of the situation there. 16 minutes to 7.
For 120 years, Rhodes University has shaped history. From Sir George Corey's pioneering 62 conversations capturing the early history of the Eastern Cape, to the first email to be sent in South Africa, and now leading the way in nanotechnology. Rhodes University is more than an educational institution. We are a legacy in motion. Be part of the evolving legacy. Rhodes University, where leaders learn.
For the first time in 30 years, the ANC is set to lose its majority. Opposition parties have united as the multi-party charter for South Africa.
A strong democratic alliance with a proven track record
Can anchor a new government that serves the people.
But a new government that works is only possible if you vote for it. Let's unite and rescue South Africa. Vote DA.
This political party advertisement was paid for by the political party concerned. The views expressed in this advertisement are those of the political party and not those of the SABC.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga.
I'm unprepared for this rapid fire. I'm just going to put that out there as a disclaimer. The thought just came to my mind right now. If you had to have dinner with one person, who would it be?
Rihanna. She's fabulous, and she also has like a great business ethic. She needs to teach me a lot of things.
Right? Okay. If there was one piece of advice that you would not listen to.
That's a hard one. You know, when I first came out, there was a whole thing of you're not special, you know, things happen to everyone. I would not take that advice. We are special. I believe in being delusional. Delusion will get you far. Believe that you are special and that you are meant to be at a higher place, and then things will happen for you.
That was Miss Universe, Zozibini Tunzi.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga. Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m. SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
14 minutes to 7. Good morning. Parliament's Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interests says it's recommending that Parliament's political leadership undergo lifestyle audits after the elections. In other words, the new people who are elected to those positions would go through a lifestyle audit in the next Parliament. The committee also says MPs should not use derogatory language on social media. You may remember 2 weeks ago, the former National Assembly Speaker, Nosaviwe Mapisa-Ngakula, appeared in court on charges of corruption relating to her time as Defence Minister. Bekiwe Nkosi is the co-chair of the Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interests in Parliament. Mr. Nkosi, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. The name is Bekiwe or Beki Nkosi.
Bekiwe, I apologise. Sorry about that. So what kind of audit are you proposing here?
The committee decided that members who will be part of the next administration should be subjected to lifestyle audits, particularly those that are in leadership positions in the National Assembly. People such as presiding officers, chairs of committees, whips of political parties, and those that would have been flagged by the disclosure system in the committee.
Would Parliament conduct this, or would someone else conduct this membership audit, this lifestyle audit?
Parliament would conduct it where it requires additional resources. Parliament would utilize external but government-related services like the Department of Public Administration and other institutions that have the capacity to do this.
Has this ever happened before? I can't recall it happening before. Has it happened before?
It has not happened before. We thought, as we undertook, that in reviewing the audit, we should be in line with what is happening in both the private and the public sector. Already, members of the executive and members of provincial executives are subjected to this type of audits. And to be in line with that, but also to ensure that we implement overall changes in the ethics code. We introduce this, so it is new.
Is this only a recommendation, or is there any way you can make it binding on the next Parliament? And I imagine the next Parliament might have the authority to conduct its own affairs. So is this binding or not?
As a committee, we made the recommendation to Parliament, so it is up to Parliament to adopt. We do hope that with the agreement of all political parties, the next assembly will adopt this before they even begin their business. Our recommendation is to the effect that it should be adopted and that members should be provided with training on the code of ethics even before they do anything.
I saw a report this morning that you also say MPs should not use derogatory language on social media. Do you mean that you might have, or Parliament would have jurisdiction over what MPs say on social media? I mean, could Parliament move against someone, an MP, a member of Parliament, who uses derogatory language on social media, or is it just a recommendation?
It's part of the recommendations in the code because we have had instances in the past where members of Parliament have brought Parliament into disrepute or they have transgressed the code through the use of social media. So all we're saying is that they should not use social media for racist, derogatory, or undermining language. They will use social media. They are allowed to use social media, but where this conflicts with the code in future, it will be a transgression.
Do you think it can really work, Mr. Nkosi? I mean, it can look like people in Parliament or the speakers battle to keep discipline over members of Parliament when they're in Parliament. I don't know if it'll work on Twitter or X.
Look, the code is complaints-driven. So where social media is used to perpetuate racist, derogatory, or conduct that is not in line, any member of the public or even the committee itself can lodge a complaint against a member. So it will work.
Thank you very much indeed. Bekizwe Nkosi is the co-chair of the Joint Committee on Ethics and Members' Interests in Parliament. 8 minutes now to 7 o'clock.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. A reminder of some pretty severe flooding last night in the Margate area, southern parts of KZN. It has washed away the roadworks in the central Margate area, so that section of roadway is closed. It's the R620. I think they call it National Road, which is a bit confusing, but it's the sort of extension of Marine Drive. And there is some queuing pressure at the top end of that closure, which is sort of around the Bank Road area. There's a lot of pressure there, and just motorists having to divert. In fact, you'll probably find yourself being shipped onto the smaller Marine Drive through Margate, but it is closed. The 620 and the road shut probably for some time, and there is quite a bit of diversion pressures in that area. Just up to KZN, or staying in KZN, but up towards Durban, there are multiple trucks on your way to Durban this morning, coming out of Pietermaritzburg, one before Market Road, one or two before Ashburton, and another before Linfield Park, Umlust Road area. So just leaving Pietermaritzburg on your way to Durban, potential for some real stop-start traffic on that N3 going east today. Joburg side, the N12, both sides of the city's heavy, coming in from Protea Glen, big queues going down towards the Golden Highway exit. And if you're coming in from the Ekurhuleni side, a stationary vehicle between Atlas Road and Rondebolt Road, and that's pushing a delay back into the Benoni area and looking quite heavy as you come out through Boksburg. R21 already queuing on the southbound run through towards the roadworks at Clayville. Don't forget about that, a new week, but no change in terms of the double lane closure there. Cape Town this morning, Baden-Powell Drive still closed at the bottom of Khayelitsha. It's closed effectively between Meway and Walters Sisulu Road, so you're not going to be able to get from the sort of N2 down through to Strandfontein, or N2 down through towards Mitchell's Plain, or going the other way. It's a full closure of Baden-Powell as that protesting just rumbles into another week as well. And the highways are fairly busy, no major obstructions. The N1 heavy from Belleville through to Kuburg, get a change, N2 backing up from just after the airport all the way through effectively to Hospital Bend. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.
Okay, let's talk about e-tolls. What's the state of play there?
1 second before midnight, will official myself and the minister switch off the e-tolls and making this part of our roads history, and ensure that whoever that was not using or was protesting against e-tolls will start a new chapter of rebuilding our roads as not e-toll, but as ordinary roads that can be utilized by anyone, anytime, whatever moment they want to utilize them.
Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi. So there we are at midnight. E-tolls finish and cloud.
The National Pulse, weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m. Call us on 086 000 2032.
Well, that's the number of calls coming through around the situation with Iran and Israel, the situation around former President Zuma and Mkhonto weSizwe. That's a big story as well. Also, voice notes coming through this morning around the National Student Financial Aid Scheme.
Good morning, SG and your team. This is Mlungis from Durban. So basically, I just want to touch bases in regard of NSFAS and the board thing going on, and plus the Minister of Higher Education. I think we have a great opportunity as a country right now, since we're going on election on the 29th of May. So basically, we are very profound because we have an opportunity to change the administration totally. Thank you.
All right, we'll try and find out more for you on the situation with NSFAS in the next little while. Denzel on the line from Kimberley, former President Jacob Zuma. Good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
Go for it, Denzel.
Stephen, Jacob Zuma, he wants to, he created this, he started this MK party.
Yeah.
First thing, to disrupt our democracy. Secondly, to put a huge question mark on the credibility of the IEC. And thirdly, to make everything uncomfortable for each and every political party. Now, Stephen, this person, Jacob Zuma, he was in the same predicament 2007. Now, I even felt pity for Zuma when Advocate Msher said he was treated unfair. And I even voted for the ANC, Stephen. Now, this person, Zuma, is using the same tactic. The same tactic that he used, he is using our state institutions. Now, we need leaders who have a strong backbone, who can make the right decisions and not get emotional and personal about it. Stephen, I want to talk about Thabo Bester and Zuma. When Thabo Bester escaped, his victims were so scared and they feel unsafe. Now, I'm going to compare to Zuma exactly. When Zuma is trying to do this thing now, when he's trying to get in parliament, I'm feeling the exact same thing. I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling unsafe, Stephen. We must not allow this person to get into parliament. And lastly, the IEC played right into his game by this thing of where they went to a constitutional court. They were not supposed to do that, according to me. They are playing right into the game of Jacob Zuma. That is what he wanted. But either way, they are doomed, the IEC, because he's targeting them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen.
All right, Denzel, thank you. Yeah, look, I think it is a difficult choice for the Electoral Commission. I think it was a difficult choice. We'll talk more about that in the next half hour as well. The situation in Iran and Israel. Bond, hi, good morning from Kabeja.
Good morning, Stephen. In terms of international law, a state cannot attack another state. States are sovereign.
Yeah.
So if South Africa is a sovereign state, has got embassies all over the world, those embassies are extensions of the territory of South Africa. They cannot be violated. So when Israel attacked the consulate in Syria, it was an attack on Iran, not necessarily the physical entity being Iran. That was an unlawful attack. Now, what Iran did was to attack Israel on Sunday in retaliation.
Yeah.
Both acts were unlawful. Israel's attack on the consulate was unlawful, as well as Iran was unlawful. It states that it was acting in self-defense. Unfortunately, Article 51 of the UN Security Council states clearly that self-defense can only be when an attack is imminent or is ongoing. Unless Iran felt that there was going to be another imminent attack on a similar situation, then it can justify self-defense. As it is, both acts are illegal.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
In terms of international law.
Yes.
The Security Council is seized with that. I'm sure it's going to score with both countries. If it escalates, then we are going to be on the precipice of a third world war, if I cannot exaggerate, because those two countries have got nuclear weapons.
Well, we don't know about Iran and we don't know about Israel, but we kind of know. Yes.
Yes. So both acts, being fair, were unlawful. Israel is not guilty to attack the consulate. It was an act of provocation, as was Iran. Iran could have reported Israel's unlawful act to the Security Council.
Yes.
Also, the third condition that we always forget about, Article 51 says that even if you're acting in self-defense, you must go back to the Security Council and report your act of self-defense. You can't just keep quiet and say you're acting in self-defense. Those are three conditions. There must be a current attack, an imminent attack, and report your act of self-defense to the Security Council. No country does that. Thank you very much.
Fondant Kaberga, thank you. An interesting point there. Look, there's going to be a lot more, I think, to come on this. We'll talk more about NSFAS. We'll talk more about the Electoral Commission and Mkhonto weSizwe in the next half hour. That conversation around school leaving certificates to come as well. You with SFM leading the conversation. Good morning, 7 o'clock.
In our top stories, Israel vows to respond to Iran's attack and multi-million rand asbestos trial set to start. Good morning. Israel's ambassador to the UN has told the Security Council that Iran's aerial assault against its territory crossed every red line and Israel would defend its future. The Council was meeting in an emergency session after the attack on Israel by Iran this past weekend. Israel's envoy Gilad Erdan warned that Iran had crossed every red line.
What would you do if you were in Israel's shoes? How would you react if your existence was threatened every single day? While the Ayatollah regime thinks, they only think, that Israel is a frog in a boiling water, that we are becoming accustomed to the threats on our survival and won't notice until it's too late, they are wrong. You are wrong. This attack crossed every red line, and Israel reserves the legal right to retaliate. We are not a frog in boiling water. We are a nation of lions.
Meanwhile, Iran's envoy for his part told the emergency session that it was acting in self-defense after accusing Israel of airstrikes against its consulate in Damascus in Syria on the 1st of April. Key leadership of its Revolutionary Guard were killed. Iran's envoy Saeed Aravani indicated they viewed the matter as concluded and urged the Council to condemn Israel's aggression against its diplomatic mission in Syria.
Iran's operation was entirely in the exercise of Iran's inherent right to self-defense as outlined in Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations and recognized by international law. This concluded action was necessary and proportionate. It was precise and only targeted military objectives and carried out carefully to minimize the potential for escalation and prevent civilian harm.
The United Nations Secretary-General says the Middle East is on the brink and the people of the region are confronting the real danger of a devastating full-scale conflict. Antonio Guterres was addressing an emergency session of the Security Council after Iran launched a large-scale reprisal aerial attack against Israel. Guterres has urged for maximum restraint.
It's time to step back from the brink. It's vital to avoid any action that could lead to major military confrontations on multiple fronts in the Middle East. Civilians are already bearing the brunt and paying the highest price. And we have a shared responsibility to actively engage all parties concerned to prevent further escalation. As the Friendly Relations Declaration of 1970 states, acts of reprisal involving the use of force are barred under international law.
After more than 2 years on the pre-trial roll, the trial of the multi-million rand asbestos roof removal scandal will get underway in the Free State High Court today. 18 accused, including companies, are facing more than 70 counts of corruption and money laundering. This relates to the alleged irregular awarding of the 255 million rand asbestos roof removal contract in the province in October 2014. The accused include former Premier of the Free State, Ace Magashule, and businessman Edwin Sodi, amongst others. Magashule's attempts to secure a stay of prosecution have failed. Aphumelele Mdlalane reports.
The much-anticipated trial is set from April until June. Ace Magashule, Edwin Sodi, former Human Settlements MEC Olim Lamleli, and others face charges of fraud, corruption, money laundering, and contravention of the Public Finance Management Act. During the last appearance, a warrant of arrest was issued for accused 5 Diamond Hill Trading representative after failing to make it to court without an apology. This is the company owned by the late Piccolomzi Igom Pambani. Pambani was shot dead in Sentin in July 2017 in a suspected hit.
The Senzo murder trial is set to resume at the High Court in Pretoria this morning. In the previous court appearance, Inatus expert Christopher Mutlo wrapped up his testimony. Judge Rata Mukhetleng granted a recess so the defence can prepare for the cross-examination. 5 men are on trial for the murder of the Bafana captain who was shot and killed in 2014. A ballistics expert is expected to take the stand this morning. And finally, the United Nations has called for greater humanitarian assistance to help the huge numbers of people who flee Sudan each day as the country marks 1 year since the start of a war between its army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The BBC's Electra Naismith reports.
The UN says almost 15,000 people have been killed, more than 8 million have been displaced. The country is barrelling towards famine. Diplomatic attempts to stop the fighting have faltered as competing regional powers back and arm the warring sides in pursuit of murky agendas. It means there's no end in sight. But with Ukraine and Gaza grabbing Western attention, Sudan is at risk of becoming a forgotten conflict.
Recapping the top story, Israel's ambassador to the UN has told the Security Council that Iran's aerial assault against its territory crossed every red line and Israel would defend its future. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. Soccer and Mbombela Stadium gears up to host another electrifying Nedbank Cup final. And in tennis, Stefano Tsitsipas sweeps to a masterful victory at the Monte Carlo Masters. More on these stories just before 7:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
R21 South leaving Pretoria down to the airport area. The roadworks at Clayville already backlogging traffic quite substantially. It's probably going to surprise you how heavy that is. If you do that run every day, it is worse than normal, so make sure you've got extra time for those flight connections. N12 leaving Benoni into Boxburg area. It's a breakdown between Atlas and Rondebolt Road, which is backing that traffic up through to Snake Road. The N12 coming from Protea Glen up to Eldorado Park, Joburg bound, stays heavy. And the roadworks this morning, surprising motorists coming out of Soweto, left lane closure at Albertina Sisulu Road, and that backlog through to about Rancho Road, so it's very heavy. Lots of breakdowns just south of Pietermaritzburg, before Market Road, around Ashburton and down at Umlas Road as well, so just watch for sluggish conditions making your way through there. Big crash just on the eastern side, on the Port Shepstone side of Isn't-Gulweni. If you're on the N2, there might be a delay to get through there. And Cape Town, pedestrians being knocked down, junction of Strand Road and LaBelle, so that's causing delays at that junction in the Stickland area, but also causing an additional delay coming out of Kales River on Fun Rivik up towards the R300 for a connection onto Strand Road, and still no traffic lights on the R44 and Annandale Road. So if you're moving out of Somerset West up towards Stellenbosch, another busy start to your new week through there. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7:08. Good morning. You're with SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. For more on the decision by the Higher Education Minister, Dr. Blade Nzimande, to dissolve the board, remove the board of NSFAS in just a moment. Also, more on the sort of dispute, I suppose, between the Electoral Commission and Mkhonto weSizwe. And I think there are going to be very interesting cases coming through around this. It's going to be one of the big issues of the week, I suspect. And former President Jacob Zuma, I'm sure, will be outside a court sort of campaigning at some point, as we've seen over the last few days. The conversation around school leaving certificates. When's the right age to leave school? We'll look at that from 8:30. You might have a view on that. You can book your spot now for that conversation on 086 000 2032. Good morning, 7:09.
SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za. At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Well, the Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Blade Nzimande, now confirming he's dissolved the board of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme because the board simply, as he puts it, could not perform its basic responsibilities. He specifically said one of the reasons he dissolved the board was that he requested the board to end the deals with the fintech companies that were failing to pay students back in December. And the board still had not done so. And as you know, the organisation Out has also published a voice recording. It shows that the former NSFAS chair, Ernest Khoza, was discussing how companies received contracts while making donations to the SACP. The SACP has strongly denied that it received money from these service providers. Earlier this morning, Veli Mbele, the spokesperson for the Higher Education Minister, spoke to Elvis Preston. And that interview is still available for you as a podcast on our page. Rudy Heineke is the investigations manager at OUTA, who's been following the story very, very closely indeed. Rudy, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
In your view, is this the right decision by the Minister? If NSFAS, if the board had sort of refused his request to actually stop these payments, did he have any other option?
Stephen, I don't think so. It is not only the board. We also saw last year in the response report that some of the senior officials at NSFAS were also implicated by the report. They have not been investigated. There's no disciplinary hearing as we speak that's ongoing or started off. The fintech companies are still there. And I think we should look at something else as well, is that, the statutory mandate of NSFAS is one thing, and that is to assist poor and working class students financially. That's their duty, that's their mandate. And they cannot they do not perform, up to scratch with that.
In other words, the whole system needs a sort of the whole institution needs something bigger than just dissolving the board. Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely what I'm saying. We cannot, see an organization like this or an institution with a budget of more than 50 billion rand a year. Not getting good audits. There's adverse findings in 2 years back, the audit there. We haven't seen the financials of the last financial year. We cannot carry on like this. Good governance is imminent, and we do hope and we trust that Mr. Nomvalo will make a change when he's taking over.
So Freeman Nomvalo is the person you're referring to. He's the administrator. He's someone who's very, very experienced person. One of the things that I don't quite understand is that the minister says he made this request to the board to stop this system or to stop using these fintech companies back in December. Now, I'm sure there's an argument somewhere, and there'll probably be law on this, that a minister can't just tell a board what to do. A board does actually have certain rights and responsibilities, and that's one of the reasons we have them. But if you are one of these companies, one of these fintech companies, you'd get a small payment each time you made a bigger payment to a student. So the longer these students were in place, the more money they would make. And I'm afraid we live in such a cynical era that someone's going to ask if these contracts were left in place deliberately to allow these companies to make more money.
Well, if we look at what was said in the recordings, that we released earlier this year, the people speaking to Mr. Kosa said, pleaded to him, just give us another 3 or 4 months, and that is exactly what happened. And it is still carrying on. These companies are still making the payments with the TVET colleges, although the universities will take over the payments now, direct payments to students for university students. The TVET students, they are still being paid by these fintech companies. And we've seen last year and we've seen the beginning of this year, there's a lot of unhappiness from the student side. They don't get their allowances on time. They don't get their allowances at all. And, if you think about this is the only funds that some students will have to survive in a month. One cannot, play around with that and not making payments and say, yes, we've made payments to 80% of the people we are on par. That is not good enough. Each and every student should and must get their allowances on time.
Do you know if the TVET colleges would have the capacity to take over the payments as universities have done? Because if they don't, then we really are in a very difficult position.
According to what the minister said and the media releases that we've seen, the TVET colleges don't have the ability to make these payments. But Stephen, like I said in the beginning, this is the mandate of NSFAS. They should handle this in-house. If we talk about direct payments, it is not through a middleman, not through a third party. It is direct payments from NSFAS to the student. And it cannot be that difficult. I think I've said it many times before. If the public service can pay almost 2 million employees and contractors every month on time, why can't NSFAS do it as well? University students, TVET college students, all of them, NSFAS that's their mandate. That's what they should do, and that's what they should work towards, not to appoint third service providers to do the job for them.
Is Freeman Namvalo, as I say, a very experienced person? Is he the right person to be the administrator at NSFAS now? And an administrator has far-reaching powers, more powers often than a board or a CEO.
Yes, correct. The powers of the administrator is, like you said, very wide and taking over the job basically of the CEO as well as the board. What we know about Mr. Nombalo is that he's a very experienced man, the former Accountant General of South Africa, serving at Treasury for a very long time, also the former CEO of SAICA. So it is one thing that we do believe is that he understands good governance. And with his financial background, I do believe that he will be able to assist to make the plans and to take good governance forward at NSFAS.
Rudy Heineke, thank you very much indeed. Investigations Manager at the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse, out at 16 minutes after 7.
Stay on top of all meaningful, top trending stories right here on SAFM. Leading the conversation.
Well, it looks like it's going to be another week with a political conversation dominated in part by former President Jacob Zuma's political party, Umkhonto we Sizwe. As you heard last week, the Electoral Commission deciding to appeal the decision by the Electoral Court to overturn its decision to uphold an objection to Zuma being a parliamentary candidate for MK. The Electoral Court has not yet given its reasons for this decision. It's expected to give those reasons this week. The Constitutional Court has not yet said if or when it will hear the case. The IEC says it has to lodge this appeal because it needs clarity on the law and because this is a matter around the actual text of the Constitution. MK says it believes the IEC is sort of biased against it. It's called one of the commissioners, Janet Love. It says that she must actually resign from the commission. Ibrahim Fakir is an elections consultant and analyst at the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. Ibrahim, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Hi, morning, Stephen.
This is growing more and more complex just before the most contentious elections we've had since 1994. Is the IEC right to appeal this decision?
Absolutely. And I think we must just change the wording a little bit here, Stephen. I think the word appeal is a little bit ill-advised because what the IEC is doing is actually seeking clarity on what its role and function is in terms of the Constitution, specifically with regard to Section 47(1)(e). And the reason why it's seeking clarity, Stephen, is that, irrespective, and I've heard this argument, I'm sure you've heard it too, that the IEC should have waited perhaps after the Electoral Court has given its reasons. But the reasons for the Electoral Court's decision are actually immaterial to what the IEC is actually saying. The IEC is saying whether the Electoral Court based its reasoning on a remission of sentence or whether it was one of the arguments which was advanced by the parties that the IEC has no role and function in terms of Section 47(1)(e). The IEC needs to know existentially what does it do when people make objections to candidates on candidates' lists of political parties. That's all they're asking for. They're not appealing this. And I think we should resist the idea of taking the Zuma or the MK party talking points, which are that this is about Mr. Zuma. It has absolutely nothing to do with him. This is about seeking clarity existentially about the role and function of the IEC in terms of objections which are lodged against candidate X, Y, or Z.
And I suppose if they waited until after the election, the issue would be moot and a judge just wouldn't hear it.
Absolutely, because if you woke up tomorrow and you decided that there is an objectionable person on one or other of the political parties' lists, or for that matter, there's someone who appears on the voters' roll who should not be there, just for example, and you go and lodge this objection, specifically in this case about a person on a party's candidate lists, the IEC must say what? No, sorry, Stephen. We'll wait for the National Assembly to convene after the election, and then they'll decide whether that person on the list has to be replaced or not, or they make the whole exercise a moot point after the election. But the exercise becomes moot fun, and it makes a mockery of the idea that the party lists are open for inspection and objections. Otherwise, what is the point?
So, I mean, this gets to another thing, because I've heard some speculation the Electoral Court may rule, or it may turn out that they made this decision because the Constitution says someone who is sentenced to more than 12 months in prison in the last 5 years cannot go to Parliament, but does not say they cannot be a candidate. I mean, it sounds like splitting hairs. So they're making a distinction, this would be the argument, that they're making a distinction between being a candidate for Parliament and actually going to Parliament. You're saying that cannot be the case.
I'm not convinced that can be the case, and I'm not. Again, I'm keeping an open mind. And guess what? So is the IEC, and that's why the IEC is actually going to court, precisely to say, court, give us a interpretation of this. Is there a difference between a candidate and a potential person who's going to be a member of Parliament? Or is this process something in which we have a role to play? Or don't we have a role to play? You only want us to decide where the voting stations are, how many, recruit the staff, print the ballot papers, manage the election, and all the other things which are in the provisions of the law, such as objections to candidates, inspection of the voters' roll, tell us whether we have some role or no role at all. And so precisely the question you're asking is what the IEC is going to court to ask. And so this idea that this has to do with candidate X, Y, or Z is literally propaganda. And I think what has happened, you said in the intro that the headlines are going to be dominated by this particular story. Well, it shouldn't, simply because that is not the story. The story is, quite simply, the IEC saying, one of the arguments which were advanced in court is this, that we have no role in terms of this, of the Section 47(1)(e), so tell us whether we do or we don't. In fact, now that whole thing has been turned on its head, and it's been made a political issue when in fact it isn't. So irrespective, Stephen, whatever the court decides and the basis on which it decides, whatever its reasoning is, the IEC is saying that's all well and good. It might be that the court has decided this is a remission of sentence. The court may have confused parole with remission. The court may have confused a pardon with remission. Whatever the case is, we actually don't care as the IEC. What we care about is, one of the arguments advanced is that we have no role. Tell us whether we do or we don't. And precisely the point you're making, are we splitting hairs? Have we misinterpreted this? Tell us what we do.
So isn't it, I mean, I accept what you say about the fact that this is clarity and therefore the reasons of the Electoral Court don't matter. But could it not be embarrassing to the Electoral Commission if the reasons from the Electoral Court came in and suddenly it all sort of made sense, if you know what I mean? You know, and isn't this the risk? And that there is also a risk in the court of public opinion. I mean, the legal decisions by the courts are going to sort of be the most important thing here, but how the Electoral Commission looks also matters, and isn't that one of the problems?
Perception does matter. And in fact, what this should do in the public mind is say that, hey, perception-wise, we actually do have an IEC which is bound by the rule of law. They have not decided to simply take matters into their own hands. They also made it quite clear that they're not appealing this issue, they're seeking clarity. And I think we should encourage public institutions which are seeking clarity about their role, their function, their existence, particularly in terms of the law and the constitution. So on the contrary, this should shore up the credibility of the IEC rather than denude it. That's number one. Point number two, of course public perception matters, Stephen, but what is obvious here is that the IEC is saying, look, the politicians all around on every issue, including the devising of the current electoral system, ill-advised as it is, late as it has been, much of this is not our fault. It's actually the fault of the political parties. They are now trying to exploit every little loophole. So give us clarity on where we stand. And again, that should show up their credibility, not detract from it.
We now have a situation where one political party, MK in this case, is making quite regular accusations against the Electoral Commission, and in fact is now calling for one of the commissioners to resign. And I can't remember a political party calling for a specific commissioner to resign. It may have happened, but I can't recall it happening in our elections. Could this weaken the legitimacy of our elections?
They've attempted, they try, all political parties do it, including the current governing party. In fact, one of the other commissioners was they may not have been asked to resign, yes, so you might be right about that. But they were certainly accused of abusing the IEC and using the IEC against a specific political party, in this case, the ruling party. So every party has made spurious allegations against the IEC. Now, make no mistake, Stephen, no one is saying that the IEC is perfect, because it isn't. Every election has administrative and management irregularities. In some cases, there are even major logistical problems. We've had creeping incidences where people who appear on the voters' roll who should not be there. In some cases, candidates have appeared in more than one political party's list. They haven't spotted it. There have been administrative and management problems. There's sometimes been problems in the tabulation, calculation, and counting of the votes here and there. There have been some problems. There have been increased number of court cases, and I'm not including here the spurious ones. I'm talking about genuine court cases about potential conflicts and so on. They've all existed. They're all there. But overall, everyone's accepted more or less the results of the election. And that's part of the credibility and enhance the legitimacy of the IEC and of the electoral process. This time around, of course, the intensification of the problems, the intensification of the issues are so deep and so concerning. Combine that with the lateness of the day in which the electoral system was finally settled upon, the non-clarity on a number of regulations, the inability to have conducted serious public education and outreach. Those are all issues, but they're not issues of the IEC. These problems are the makings of our immature and frankly quite useless political parties, if one can excuse my usage of the word. But these are real problems of politics. And so what the political parties are doing, without exception, are trying to blame the election manager and election administrator. They're trying to detract from the expertise of the organization. And why they're doing this? So that they lay a basis on which they can question the outcome. It's probably the first time we have such an intense and deep drive towards questioning the legitimacy of the outcome. But I think we should, as a public, have to be very wary that there are going to be problems, but we shouldn't elevate molehills into mountains.
Abraham Fakir, thank you. An elections analyst and consultant at the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. 28 minutes after 7.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. The weekend after the election, what will we be watching? Saturday, the 1st of June?
It'll be the final, and it's going to be a cracker, Stephen. Mbombela Stadium will be turned into a fortress of football frenzy. Now, this marks the second time the iconic 2010 FIFA World Cup venue, Mbombela Stadium, will host the Nedbank Cup final. And this is following the 2011 final, where Orlando Pirates secured a 3-1 victory over Black Leopards at the same venue. This final comes hot on the heels of the semi-final draw, where Chippa United will meet Orlando Pirates. Stellenbosch FC were drawn to meet Mamelodi Sundowns. Elsewhere, Bayer Leverkusen's record-breaking run to their first Bundesliga title came with a 16-month plan. The team made sure of their first trophy in 31 years, with 5 matches left in the season, snapping Bayern Munich's 11-year stranglehold on the Bundesliga. Elsewhere, Arsenal's title chances suffered a major blow after they lost 2-0 at home to Aston Villa. Here's their boss, Mikel Arteta.
We had one of the best performances in the first half that we had this season, by far, against a really good team. It should have been 3 or 4 or more. It didn't happen. In the second half, momentum shifted. We could not control and generate what we did in the first half. We struggled. We conceded 2 very poor goals, and we lost the game. So congratulate the opponent. And now is the moment to stand up as a leader, as a character, to make yourself count. Because when you win and 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 win for 4 months, it's very, very simple to do it. The moment is now.
Tennis action. Stefano Tsitsipas made short work of the Norwegian 8-seed Casper Ruud as he seized a third Monte Carlo Masters title in 4 years with a 6-1, 6-4 victory. Here's Tsitsipas.
Congrats to you, congrats to your team for this amazing journey we both had to end up here. I don't know if you guys know, but me and Casper started, we date back a long time, same age category, so we've been playing from the smallest courts you can imagine to ending up here in front of you.
More sport on Sunrise, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. A lot more to come. We'll find out more about the situation regarding the Benylin pediatric syrup in the next little while. You're with SFM leading the conversation, 7:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, Israel's ambassador to the UN has told the Security Council that Iran's aerial assault against its territory crossed every red line and Israel would defend its future. Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Dr. Bladen Zimande, says while the decision to dissolve the NSFAS board was not easy, it's part of a set of interventions to improve the organizational efficiency of NSFAS to better serve students. And after more than 2 years on the pre-trial role, the trial of the multi-million rand asbestos roof removal scandal will get underway in the Free State High Court today. I'll have details on these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still pretty heavy on a couple of routes out of Soweto side this morning. If you're driving in from Protea Glen, the N12, heavy backlogs passing Lenasia down towards the Golden Highway exit at Eldorado Park. And then the N1 north out of Soweto, very heavy from sort of Rancho Road territory all the way to some lane restrictions at the Albertina Sisulu off-ramp. N12 coming in from Benoni through Boxburg stays heavy. It's a breakdown between Atlas Road and Rondebolt Road, and that traffic pushing back through Benoni back towards Pitfontein, so that's really heavy. And your 2 major routes out of Pretoria, one to Joburg, one to the airport, both are under pressure. The N1 south from Brockfontein all the way down to sort of Olifantsfontein, passing as well a breakdown stationary truck around Old Joburg Road. That's heavy. And the R21 queuing quite heavily back towards St George's Hotel territory this morning as you line up into the roadworks in the Clayville area. Durban side, pretty busy Monday. There's some roadworks left in place on the M4 Southern Freeway just by the Umbulo area, so Congella if you like. So coming in from Jacobs and Clarewood, the Southern Freeway into Durban. It's a lot heavier than you might be expecting. There's breakdowns on the M2 north and south between Kwamashu and Gateway and the roadworks So that's all very busy. And the breakdown out of Pietermaritzburg this morning causing delays as you approach the Linfield Park area. Cape Town, the main road run between Muizenberg and Fish Hoek's quite busy. There's delays down through the St James area, and then it gets really heavy in towards Clovelly territory. And if you're driving Brackenfell, Kales River, Stickland, there's a big snarl up. Pedestrian down on Strand Road at Labelle. So Strand Road backlogging deep into Funribbick Road territory coming out of Kales River, and even the Bottleray Road and the Mundell Road as you come up out of Kales River into Brackenfell across to Labelle. It's all very heavily backed in that part of Cape Town. And no traffic lights, this is worth a mention. Marine Drive at Neptune Street in Pardon Island. So additional delays as you line up from Milnerton along that coastal route into town this morning. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
With Intaleng Lachela again. Intaleng, good morning. Asian markets, how's it all looking?
So, safe haven assets are in vogue, Stephen, with gold trading near record highs at $2,300. Meanwhile, equity markets are on the back foot, with Asian stocks mostly in the red. Both the Asia Down and Japanese Nikkei are losing 1%. This comes as rising geopolitical tensions in the Middle East boosted demand for safe haven investments. Traders on that end are also eyeing China GDP numbers, which will be released later this week. We have US futures in the meantime seeming to have shaken off the downbeat sentiment, with those indexes in the green. Back at home, the mood has been mixed as local traders digest first quarter earnings, geopolitical issues, and a pushback in rate cuts. We saw the all-share ending Friday pretty flat, up 0.01%.
And then Tiger Brands is expanding their peanut butter factory. The world needs more peanut butter.
Well, for all the peanut butter lovers out there, they'll be happy to know that Tiger Brands, the owner of the Black Cat brand, is working on offering consumers better and healthier options. And in an attempt to do that, the group has invested about 300 million rand in a peanut butter factory. The new facility basically offers more space and provides the group with increased peanut processing capabilities. Now, this is Tiger Brand's largest investment that it's done in the country, and the move has been welcomed by government, with the Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Nomalungelo Gcina, saying the move shows Tiger Brand's commitment to the growth of the economy.
Let's hope there's more crunch for your munch. And the economic week ahead, what are we waiting for?
Now, the health of local consumers will be under the spotlight this week. Stats SA will be releasing consumer inflation data and retail sales figures. Now, let's start off with inflation. Economists are expecting prices to ease. February's print saw prices quicken to 5.6%, sitting at the upper end of the South African Reserve Bank's target of 3 to 6%. Now, this further ups the case for higher interest rates for longer. We've had the SARB reiterate that rates will only be cut when inflation is less sticky. Now, this comes at consumers' expense. As you know, higher interest rates means consumers are paying more to finance debt, and high inflation means consumers are paying more for products. That now brings me to retail sales. Economists are not expecting the print to be upbeat, citing the current environment where households don't have enough disposable income.
Intaleng, thanks very much indeed. Really do appreciate it. Intaleng Lachela, of course, back with us tomorrow. More business news through the day here on SAFM. 24 minutes to 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
All right, calls coming through, and of course, big issues this morning. We've been talking again around former President Jacob Zuma, talking also about the situation around Israel and Iran. That's a big issue this morning, as you can imagine. All sorts of calls coming through that. People also looking at the issue around NSFAS, and that's become a big issue over the last little while. And it really shouldn't be such a big issue in a way. It should be something that we're able to deal with. Taki on the line from Limpopo, the Electoral Commission. How do you see it, Taki?
Very interesting how Professor Fakir has unpacked this whole issue that you were interrogating him about.
Yeah. I don't know if he's a professor, but I'm going to call him that from now on.
I will also do that because when I listen to him, I think it is long overdue for him. But having said that, Stephen, I think the point I want to make is that to be in a party list, I think it should be the responsibility of the party. And I guess the law has left that responsibility to parties to do their best in that respect. And therefore, that is why you even hear the Electoral Act requesting for a list of parties to be, calling for objections.
Yeah.
Such kinds of things. So at that level, if objection has not come from the members of the communities against this particular candidate or that candidate, one would not expect the IEC to be the one to do that.
Well, I mean, in this...
Because it would be playing dual responsibilities, which would be a conflict of some sort. But in a way, when it comes to being a member of parliament, that is where the IEC has to be able to, to exercise the law so that every process becomes credible.
I mean, look, I thought I was taken with Ibrahim Fakir's point about what's the point of opening the lists for inspection if the IEC doesn't remove them? Why would you bother? And then also there was a person who objected in this case, and we heard from him last week here on SFM Sunrise. And as I understand the law, Taki, and this wanders into interesting territory, I think. It says the chief electoral officer can also lodge an objection. So, I mean, in a way, it's almost deliberately saying to the Electoral Commission, sometimes you have to make a decision yourself.
Yeah, but I guess it's correct for what the law is saying, but putting the electoral chief officer in that position, whereas the list has been already put, and I guess maybe, Stephen, what I need to say, these are unintended consequences of this particular piece of legislation, and it needs to be subjected for scrutiny. But as far as I'm concerned, I think, frankly, the IEC cannot be blamed for not having identified this candidate or that candidate, because imagine how many candidates are there, and they work with a very strict, time frames.
Sure.
But when it comes to Parliament, for obvious reasons, that's where they have to raise their eyebrows. They cannot allow you, Stephen, to have, just a free ride and get up there, whereas that would put the credibility of the IEC's work in question. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you, Taki. On the line from Limpopo, Zola in KwaZulu-Natal. Hi.
Yes, Zola from Engobo.
Go for it.
No, morning to SS listeners. No, my contribution to this discussion about IEC versus the MK, my proposition is that as taxpayers of this country and as people who are interested in the democracy of this country, we should guard our Chapter 9 institution jealously. And why I'm saying this? I'm saying this precisely because while we appreciate that there are political analysts like the contribution that was done by Ibrahim Fakir, but the fundamental question that we should ask is IEC step to appeal? But he came up with a very sophisticated word, which I think for us as South African also, we should carefully analyze his wording. When he says that IEC is seeking clarity, the question, SG, is, can you seek a clarity for something that you don't know? Because the reasons are not finished yet as to what exactly has influenced the Electoral Court to take the decision it has taken. So I think for me, and I think the former deputy chairperson of IEC has also commented on Friday to say that he's very skeptical about the route IEC has taken. So I think that is my contribution to say, are you able to appeal, or rather, are you able to seek a clarity for something that you don't know as to what has happened or what has influenced the decision that has been taken? And lastly, Steve, is the issue of the proposition that was done by the legal team of the MK, wherein they alleged that Ms. Love was biased towards the MK. Let's assume that the court agrees with that proposition, that indeed Ms. Love was biased against. What will this therefore mean about the credibility and the integrity of IEC? So that is my proposition.
All right, no, Zola, let's see what the courts decide. And as I say, I was one of those taken by surprise because it seemed to me so clear what the Constitution says. So let's see what the courts decide. All right, Zola, I think we've heard you. Tsepo on the line from Durban. Hi, Tsepo.
Yes, Stephen, how's it?
Yeah, well, go for it.
I think I'm complaining against MK being given an unfair airtime mileage.
Yeah.
Because this is going to carry on maybe for the next 3 weeks or so up until the Constitution. So they'll be still talking about the MK. And when you go to elections, you give in there as much as it may look as if it's negative publicity, but there's nothing called negative publicity because you're still giving the publicity. So at the end of the day, they may be doing well. And even though it's a negative publicity over other parties, remember there are around 300 parties on the ballot. And at the moment, we only hear MK. You don't even hear ANC, you don't even hear EFF. The DA have all disappeared. MK. This is really unfair.
So, Tsepo, look, I mean, I'm afraid to say it's not my job to make the election campaign fair. It's my job to treat people fairly. And the
airtime. The airtime.
No, sure.
Let's not talk the airtime.
No, sure.
That's your responsibility because you guys have been talking about MK this week. You're going to talk about it next week. You talked about it last
Tsepo,
week. And it's unfair. Don't you think?
Well, we're a news show. We do current affairs and news. I mean, this is the news, you know. It's not the news.
It's old news.
No,
it's old
Tsepo,
news,
come on.
man.
We've never had a situation like this before. Never. I mean, of course it's newsworthy. Of course we have to talk about it.
Stephen, let's be honest. The only reason that there is a talk on MK currently, especially going to this, is because there's the Zuma effect on it. If it was another smaller party, let's say APC, for example, going to be, I would have long disappeared.
Tsepo, if we avoid the news, there's no point in doing the show. No point in the radio station, frankly. No point in the SABC.
Be honest with yourself.
No, Tsepo. We have to come on. I mean, Tsepo, look, it's also up to other political parties to make the news,
to make a scuffle. It's for them to make a scuffle so that they make publicity.
Well, let's see. I don't know. Tsepo, I'll tell you what. I'm going to ask someone whose job it sometimes is to make the news. Tsepo in Durban, thank you. Gift, you're a spokesperson for the ANC in the Eastern Cape. You're on the line from King Williamstown. Where's the ANC in the elections?
Beg your pardon, Stephen?
Well, you just heard Tsepo saying that he wants to hear from the other political parties. He made the point that we aren't even hearing from the other parties that have disappeared, including the ANC, because MK is taking all the airtime. Where's the ANC? No. Come on, Gift.
Stephen, we are calling on your show on a daily basis, and we are representing the views of the ANC. And the ANC is on the ground campaigning door to door, street by street, village by village, city by city, town by town. So it's utter nonsense that someone will say, where's the ANC? We're on the ground. We're doing our work. Secondly, Stephen, I think the issue that I want to raise quickly on the show this morning is the issue that it keeps on coming up, this narrative by the Zuma party, including Zuma himself, trying to discredit IEC, including its officials. And I know for a fact that this particular individual called Janet Love was targeted. And I think this is just disingenuous. Look, I think MK party must be taken to task because its leader has got a history of trying to discredit institutions of this country. We know for a fact that there were once upon a time in this country where we had SARS as one of the jewels of this country. Once upon a time we had National Treasury, which was a jewel of this country. And we had the man called Zuma, who deployed his psychophants to lead SARS and experienced a lot of challenges and problems and shenanigans.
Weren't ANC MPs told to vote to keep him in office? I'm sure Gwede Mantashe told them to do that. Come on, during that time, Gift.
No, Stephen. Most of us in the ANC were totally against what Zuma did with SARS. We are against what Zuma did
but your MPs didn't vote against him.
No, Stephen. South Africans, I know, they know the truth. The point here is that Zuma has got a history of trying to discredit institutions of this country, and we cannot allow that because now the narrative that is trying to peddle in the public arena is that we must not trust the IEC, and even the outcome of the elections must be doubted. That's a point that this Zuma party, including Zuma himself, is trying to parade in this country, and that would be unacceptable, and we must condemn that as South Africans.
All right. Gift on the line from King Williamstown, as you know, phones in fairly often, is a spokesperson for the ANC in the Eastern Cape. All right, your view, 086 000 2032, 14 minutes to 8.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
News over the weekend that the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, SAPRA, recalling 2 batches of Benylin pediatric syrup. There are long batch numbers to these, so Google them. But what they're doing is basically, if you have this syrup, it's a raspberry odor, so I think that's the red Benylin cough syrup, and if it expires at the end of April this year, then they're recalling that. Let's speak now to the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. Dion Pooven is the Senior Manager for Regulator Compliance at SAPRA. Dion, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
As I understand it, this is all because the Nigerian authorities have issued a recall, quite a serious recall from what I can see, of this syrup. Are you acting only as a result of that?
Yes, so you are correct that NAFDAC, or the Nigerian Medicines Authority, they conducted some testing of batches that they found in the market, and they picked up one batch of Benylin pediatric syrup, tested it, found high levels of diethylene glycol, and then proceeded to issue a public notice to say people should not be using this medication and it should be recalled. And it is on that information that we are acting now in collaboration with the manufacturer, Kenvue.
This is, I mean, from what I can see, the consequences, the symptoms of this, from what's been reported, are very, very serious. I mean, sometimes we have recalls because things, run out of date or there's something here. I mean, this includes very serious consequences.
Yes, it does. So diethylene glycol does have some very serious side or adverse effects, and it can prove fatal if you do not consult with your healthcare professional when you see these adverse effects. And this is why we have done this type of recall, which is a very serious type of recall because of the consequences of actually ingesting this diethylene glycol. So that is why this sort of recall involves immediate release to inform the public.
Is the manufacturer helping you with this?
Yes, no, the manufacturer is. In conjunction with the manufacturer, this recall has been issued. The manufacturer is currently busy with an investigation to determine how this diethylene glycol ended up in a batch of Benylin pediatric syrup.
The fact that this batch is due to expire now, so April 2024, could that have something to do, I mean, maybe too early to say, could that have something to do with why this is so dangerous, that something in it expired early?
Well, we don't know at the moment, Stephen. So that is why the investigation is ongoing. And the reason that we had to put out the public release is to inform the public, don't use this because we're busy investigating what Nigeria has found.
Okay. So it's only the batches that expire at the end of April. The batch numbers are 329304 and 329303. But I mean, most people aren't going to go and look for that. If it expires at the end of April, what must you do with it? Take it back to the pharmacy?
Well, it's important to note that it is specific to Benylin pediatric syrup, and it is specific to those batch numbers. So if you are concerned about whether or not you have this batch number, you need to check that you have this batch number, and you can see that either on the box, if you still have the box, or you can look on the label if you don't have the box anymore. And then you should return it to the place where you bought it. If you don't remember where that is, you can return it to a pharmacy, or you can contact the manufacturer.
Thank you very much indeed. Dion Pooven is the Senior Manager for Regulatory Compliance at the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. Very scary situation with these two batches of Benylin pediatric syrup. All right, it's the red one, it's the raspberry flavour. If it expires at the end of April, go and take it back to the pharmacy. 10 minutes to 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032. SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Let's start in Pretoria with a crash on Steve Biko Street coming out of the Vanderboom area just by Noorday Street. So the run through the Vanderboom Pass area quite heavy this morning on that section of Steve Biko towards town. The N4 queuing heavily, Watermeyer Street through towards the N4 highway, through towards the N1. In fact, that traffic back through Watermeyer back towards Rousseau. So gives you an idea of how heavy the N4 is approaching Hatfield and driving into Pretoria. R21 super badly backed up this morning into the roadworks at Clayville. A lot heavier than you might be expecting through there. Breakdown still with us on the N12 just after Atlas Road. It remains a heavy queue coming out of Benoni through Boksburg this morning. Roadworks on the N1 just north of Soweto up by the Maresburg exit. That's a heavy delay. Traffic sitting on the N1 from as far back as Rancho Road. And there's still the big traffic on the N12 passing Lenasia. Going to be asked to queue this morning in towards the Golden Highway exit El Dorado Park as you come in towards Joburg. Durban side quite heavy on the N2. You've got queues between the M7 and Westwood Mall effectively into the roadworks through Spaghetti Junction. And then another big queue from from Kumashu through to Gateway, and that's into a breakdown in the roadworks section. Roadworks on the M4, we got a call earlier this morning saying they look like they were being lifted, but they obviously haven't. The roadworks there around the Umbilo and Congela area, so queues right back to sort of Clarewood area, the Southern Freeway to Durban looking heavy. Cape Town, heavy pressure around the Kales River, Brackenfell and the Sticklin areas. That's a result of a pedestrian collision on Strand Road at LaBelle. It's just on the Belleville side of the R300 Van Riebeek Junction, so there's all sorts of delays getting from Belleville to Kales River, and particularly coming out of Kales River. LaBelle and Botteray badly backed up there as well. And just staying in Cape Town, the M3, that's quite slow from Constantia all the way to Hospital Bend. The M5's queuing this morning from Kenilworth up to a busy turn in towards Hospital Bend via the M2. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
8 minutes to 8 the time. You know the number. Kirk on the line from Cape Town. Hi. Umkhonto Sizwe and former President Zuma. Kirk, go for it.
Good morning, Stephen. Gift is the one who's being disingenuous.
Yeah.
If it wasn't so dangerous, it would be funny how the ANC are reacting to the threat of Jacob Zuma. They created the monster, and now they don't know where to put their. There's no credibility for any of them criticizing his shenanigans with the organs of state, because they were instrumental in supporting that man and everything else he's done. In addition to that, I am from Durban originally, and I have seen the decline of the KZN municipalities, and Jacob Zuma's emergence and MK's emergence is going to further fractionalize that environment. The ANC is in a shocking state in KZN. The political assassinations are still ongoing there. So my fears for KZN are really dire coming post this election. I'm really concerned about what's going to happen.
All right, Kirk on the line from Cape Town. Yep, thank you. All right, and Paul on the line from Sekekune. The ANC manifesto, hi.
Good morning, Stephen. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well. Go for it.
Fine. Sometimes last week, I think you interviewed a lady by the name of Anne Bernstein. I don't know whether she's a professor or doctor.
Yes, I don't know if I spoke to her here, but she's from the development. She's from Enterprise Development, the Centre for Development Enterprise, and she, as I understand her criticism, which I've read and heard from, she says that the ANC is not ambitious enough in its manifesto because it doesn't want to create as many jobs as we actually need.
Yes, to use her own words, she says she's surprised that the ANC in its manifesto talk about 2.5 million, translated into around 200,000, 250 jobs per annum.
Yeah.
I'm also surprised as to how Ms. Bernstein read the ANC manifesto. In essence, the whole manifesto of the ANC, anything which the ANC says is going to do in government, it is linked to job creation. For instance, the ANC says it is going to, in its first priority, is going to engage the private sector about issues relating to economic growth and job creation. Secondly, the ANC says it's going to support local businesses, small and medium and micro enterprises. And then it went further to say it's going to encourage localization. And then it talks about Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I'm not sure if all these things which I'm citing has nothing to do with job creation. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And I was a bit surprised when she picked up this point about 2.5 million jobs in 5 years and saying, well, the ANC is not ambitious enough. But the whole manifesto, I'm saying, if you read the whole manifesto of the ANC on its 6 priorities, you will find very few commitments which are not linked to job creation. Okay. Everything about fighting corruption, it talks about state capacity, police visibility. You can't have police visibility without hiring police.
Sure. All right.
So I don't know. I don't know what is the basis of her surprise.
All right. Yeah. Paul, thank you. On the line from Sekekune. That's very interesting. I hadn't seen it like that. But look, people will interpret things in different ways. But I think the ANC election manifesto does give sort of specific jobs numbers. And I presume she's responding to that. 4 minutes to 8.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Well, still more retrenchments we expect at the South African Post Office. It's due to let go around 5,000 workers. That's almost half of its total workforce. As you know, the Post Office is in a very difficult position. The General Secretary of the National Union of Public Service and Allied Workers Union, NUPSAW, is Solly Malema. Solly, good morning.
Morning, Stephen, and greetings to your listeners.
At this stage, have those 5,000 workers already lost their jobs, or are they still in the process?
They're still in a process, Stephen, but the letters were issued.
Okay, so at this stage, they're going to lose their jobs and that's it?
Yes, we are worried that the governing party is not creating jobs, but what they are doing, they are destroying jobs. And more so, the retrenchment is not only going to affect the workers, but the poor working class community.
Sure.
Number one, the mandate of the post office. The post office is the core ICT public access network, and should be used to achieve South African universal service goods in the sector.
Okay, Solly, I mean, everyone has sympathy with people who lose their jobs and who are unemployed. The fact is, though, that people don't use the post office because for the vast majority of people, it doesn't really serve a proper function. I mean, when did you last send a letter? I mean, when did you last try and use the service at the post office and actually get what you wanted?
I hear that, Stephen, but if we had proper systems in place, the governing party deploying competent people, skilled people, by now they could have modernized so that they compete. And remember, the post office has got that sector is regulated, and they can limit the private proprietor. And the second issue, Stephen, is that if you look at the AG report, where he was highlighting many issues, there was no consequence management. So we still, our view is that the post office can still be saved.
So, I mean, I know in the US, for example, their post office, their federal post office, went through a bad patch and now seems to have recovered. I don't know if you can really say that our post office must be saved by limiting the private sector. I mean, there's a whole industry which, by the way, employs thousands of people across the country. They would lose their jobs to save the people in the post office. Would that be right?
Not really. We're not saying people must lose their job, but we need to look at the mandate of the post office. Because the working class will suffer more, because the prices will go high. Because we know that this thing is done deliberately so that post office is privatized.
So, I mean, people say these things are happening deliberately. Do you have any proof of that at all? Or you can't just say it.
The proof is there. You had the Minister of Gungubele wanting us to praise him for putting the post office under business rescue, while he himself is enjoying his salary on monthly basis.
Sorry, you haven't answered my question. Do you have any proof at all that the post office that there's a deliberate plan to privatize it? That it's being destroyed to privatize it? Do you have any proof of that statement?
We don't have to be scientific, Steve. Number one, if you look at the issue of consequence management that I've raised, the issue of, for instance, there was simple things. There was no asset register at the post office, and these are the issues that the AG raised. So there was no management there at the post office. That's why the post office collapsed. And hence we are saying it's deliberate, because the AG will raise these issues, but nobody will bother to correct them.
All right, Solly Malema, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. General Secretary of the National Union of Public Service and Allied Workers Union, with SAFM leading the conversation, 7 o'clock.
In our top stories, Israel vows to respond to Iran's attack and multi-million rand asbestos Free State case back in court. Good morning. Israel's ambassador to the UN has told the Security Council that Iran's aerial assault against its territory crossed every red line and Israel would defend its future. The Council was meeting in an emergency session after the attack on Israel by Iran this past weekend. Israel's envoy Gilad Erdan.
What would you do if you were in Israel's shoes? How would you react if your existence was threatened every single day? While the Ayatollah regime thinks, they only think, that Israel is a frog in a boiling water, that we are becoming accustomed to the threats on our survival and won't notice until it's too late, they are wrong. You are wrong. This attack crossed every red line, and Israel reserves the legal right to retaliate. We are not a frog in boiling water. We are a nation of lions.
Meanwhile, Iran's envoy for his part told the emergency session that it was acting in self-defense after accusing Israel of airstrikes against its consulate in Damascus in Syria on the 1st of April. Key leadership of its Revolutionary Guard were killed. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres earlier warned that the Middle East was on the brink and that now was the time to defuse and de-escalate. Iran's envoy Saeed Aravani indicated they viewed the matter as concluded and urged the Council to condemn Israel's aggression against its diplomatic mission in Syria.
Iran's operation was entirely in the exercise of Iran's inherent right to self-defense as outlined in Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations and recognized by international law. This concluded action was necessary and proportionate. It was precise and only targeted military objectives and carried out carefully to minimize the potential for escalation and prevent civilian harm.
In election news, ANC Gauteng Provincial Chairperson Panyaza Sufi has thanked party President Cyril Ramaphosa for supporting the provincial leadership in its bid to retain the province after the May 29th polls. Despite being the country's economic hub, Gauteng has a population of 15 million people, with 25% of the voting population. Sufi says they are working hard to address the challenges raised by communities as they prepare for the crunch elections next month.
It's a combination of everything, appreciating the work that we are doing. Secondly, impatience in terms of some of the things that affect them, especially crime and lack of jobs and service delivery in terms of roads. And the last one, which I must be honest, worries me a lot, it's a sudden trend on matters related to crime and lawlessness. The community have expressed a serious dim view to the president that it's uncontrollable. They wish that the sun must always shine because late at night they are attacked. But in terms of the position of the African National Congress, we appreciate that the president prioritizes us. Every second month he ensures that he's in our province so that we can really protect the province.
Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Dr. Blade Nzimande, says while the decision to dissolve the NSFAS board was not easy, it's part of a set of interventions to improve the organizational efficiency of NSFAS to better serve students. Nzimande briefed the media in Pretoria yesterday on his decision to dissolve the board of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme and to place NSFAS under administration. He has appointed the former CEO of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, Freeman Nomvalo, as the scheme's new administrator. Nzimande praised Nomvalo and expressed his confidence in him.
The dissolution of the board, let me repeat this, will not affect the normal functioning of NSFAS, including all payments that have got to be made. So people must not panic. We're not going to change our commitments just because there is now administration. The decision to dissolve the NSFAS board was not something that we took lightly. And I wish to assure the public that in taking these decisions, I've considered all possible implications, including the impact that it might have on NSFAS employees and the students.
After more than 2 years on the pre-trial roll, the trial of the multi-million rand asbestos roof removal scandal will get underway in the Free State High Court today. 18 accused, including companies, are facing more than 70 counts of corruption and money laundering. This relates to the alleged irregular awarding of the 255 million rand asbestos roof removal contract in the province in October 2014. The accused include former Premier of the Free State Ace Magashule and businessman Edwin Sodi, amongst others. Magashule's attempts to secure a stay of prosecution have failed. Aphumelele Mdlalane reports.
The much-anticipated trial is set from April until June. Ace Magashule, Edwin Sodi, former Human Settlements MEC Olim Lamleli and others face charges of fraud, corruption, money laundering and contravention of the Public Finance Management Act. During the last appearance, a warrant of arrest was issued for accused 5 Diamond Hill Trading representative after failing to make it to court without an apology. This is the company owned by the late Piccolomzi Igom Pambani. Pambani was shot dead in Sentin in July 2017 in a suspected hit.
And finally, President Cyril Ramaphosa will today host King Mswati of the Kingdom of Eswatini for a working visit. This follows a courtesy visit by President Ramaphosa to King Mswati 2 weeks ago. South Africa and Eswatini share strong historical bonds as well as mutually beneficial political and trade relations. Recapping the top story, Israel's ambassador to the UN has told the Security Council that Iran's aerial assault against its territory crossed every red line and Israel would defend its future. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
A very good morning to you in your SFM sports headlines. The Sharks, they script a fairy tale in rugby, becoming the first South African team to reach the European Challenge Cup semi-finals. Meanwhile, Maverick Vinales takes the MotoGP victory with South Africa's Brad Binder squeezing into 9th. We'll dive into the details just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. We're getting a good look at Margate now after the devastation of the floods and the storm that moved through there yesterday evening. Margate's R620. It's the main road. You might know it as the name National Road. It's the extension of the main Marine Drive. It is closed down in the central Margate area, and there's a lot of disruption, a lot of damage in and around the Margate region. So just drive with care, but give yourself extra time to get through possible deviations. Video of that damage up on x.com at Traffic SA. You can have a look for yourself and see what Margate and surrounds went through last night. Other issues, the R21 coming out of Pretoria remains heavy down at Clayville, a lot heavier than normal this morning. N12 breakdown the Rondebolt Road, taking forever to clear up. So the run out of Benoni through to Boksburg's heavy, and roadworks on the M1 North after Soweto up by Albertina Sisulu still causing some delays as well. Quite a heavy backlog leaving Soweto today. Durban roadworks on the Southern Freeway at Congella. That's a big backlog into town from the Clarewood area. Very heavy N2 both ways through the roadworks from Spaghetti Junction and Mgena Road, north and south equally heavy today. Cape Town, a crash involving a pedestrian a little bit earlier, Strand Road at Labelle in Stickland, so that whole sort of run out of sort of Kales River and Brackenfell still being held up. The N7 north to Bosmansdam still very busy, and if you're around South Peninsula, a lot of traffic jamming, particularly southbound on the main road from Muizenberg right through to Clovelly, slow on your way to Fishhook. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
10 after 8, good morning. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Good to hear from you this morning. You may have a thought about the post office, by the way. I mean, could it be saved at this point? What would it take? And if it was to be saved, if the retrenchments there were to be stopped, what would happen to the other people who work in the sort of courier industry, things like that? 086 000 2032. Very hard to turn the clock back, of course, as I think we know. We'll talk to the head of the Border Management Agency, Dr. Michael Mpasiato, in just a few moments around the number of people they intercepted trying to come in through the Easter period. We'll look at school leaving certificates from 8:30, and then of course the other big stories of the morning around NSFAS and around former President Zuma and MK. Tsepo saying we're giving MK too much airtime. Well, look, it's all about the news. You know, that's what it's got to be. And also, elections, in my experience, can turn very quickly. Suddenly we'll be talking or arguing or discussing or arm wrestling about something else. It can happen really very, very quickly. You know the number? It's 11 after 8.
Imagine if you could save time like you save money. A second here, a minute there. Type a little faster, walk a little faster, or you could stop scrolling on the internet. Just think of all the hours you'll save. Now, what if you could take all that time and invest it? Watch it grow. Until eventually, one day, you'd have so much time that you wouldn't know what to do with it all. But unfortunately, time doesn't work like that. It can't be stored or banked. And unlike money, you can't make it back. That's why after 50 years of investing, we've learned that time is the greatest gift of all. And the good news is, if you invest early, time gives you money. And then money gives you more time to do whatever you want to do, even if it is scrolling on the internet. Ellen Gray, long-term investing. Ellen Gray is an authorized FSP.
I'm Sindisiwe Chikunga, the Minister of Transport in South Africa. Fellow South Africans, our nation is not where it was 30 years ago. Our bus rapid transport system from Rea Vaya to my city offers affordable commute for work and learning. Our regulated airports and airspace infrastructure through which millions of international passengers travel is world-class. In aviation, maritime, road and rail, we have produced pilots, engineers, air traffic controllers, train drivers, master mariners, and seafarers, opening doors to carriers once out of reach. We have grown South Africa together, building better communities.
Nalibito la ka ke bonolo mo aghi di bantse mbark Miss B morara Miss T mo atludi the Bonnie B Bonbon, and we'll be now playing Kena on Mondays at 4:30. The day has changed but the time slot hasn't. So if you're interested in news that's happening with us kids and our peers around the world, don't forget to tune in. See you there.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
13 after 8, good morning. Glad to have you along with us this morning. The Border Management Authority saying I think it uses the word intercepted nearly 4,000 people who try to come into South Africa illegally over the Easter period. They've been going through all of the numbers. Dr. Michael Mpasiato is the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority. Mr. Commissioner, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and thanks for the invitation.
Where did you intercept these people? Where were they coming from?
Yeah, so Stephen, in the 10 days that we were implementing the Easter plan, which ran from the 26th of March until the 4th of April, when we had to deal with the return leg of the plan, that is from the 1st of April to the 4th, in a period of 4 days, this is when the majority of these people had been intercepted, and I can indicate that the majority of this had fairly been intercepted on the North Corridor, meaning the port around the Beitbridge area with Zimbabwe, and that was fairly followed by the Eastern Corridor in terms of our border with Mozambique around Libombo, and of course the third in terms of the number has been around Lesotho in the Fixback Maseru area. So that is fairly the areas through which most of the people had been intercepted.
Were they coming through ports of entry and they were picked up, or were they just trying to get across the border and hope no one noticed?
So the issue here, Stephen, is because of the effort that we have started doing in terms of sanitizing the port itself, but also the deployment of the border guards to intensify access control into the port. Most of these were fairly intercepted outside. They were actually intercepted on the vulnerable segments along the borderline. That is where the majority had been actually intercepted. And I can also indicate this point, Stephen, if you check the statement, we also separate these particular ones with the ones arrested for criminal activities. And there we talk about 143. There we were basically arresting the people who had been the key facilitators of these movements. They either smuggled people through or they smuggled goods through. And we had to actually get those ones arrested. So those ones, we did not deport them. Those ones we had to hand them over to the police for them to be processed in the country for criminal activity, for aiding and abetting.
Okay, now that makes sense. Do you know at this stage if the number of people you caught this year trying to get across the border illegally is more or less, higher or lower than the number last year? And I realize that you're a new agency, and so things have changed a little bit in the last couple of years. But do you know if the number of people caught this year is higher or lower than last year?
The number this year was higher, Stephen, and the reason why it is higher, it basically is because of the intensified, operations that we have had. Remember, we had also, improved our boots on the ground by bringing the 400 junior border guards who are at college to come and assist us in this particular period. But we do know that now they are back at college, but they will be graduating in the next month, and they will definitely go to the ground full time. On that basis, we should be able to improve going forward. In as much as the number will demonstrate it went up, it doesn't necessarily mean last year there was lesser activities. It's just because we had lesser capacity. So the progress that we will see is when the numbers go down, not going down because of our less of capacity, but going down because we are now serving as a deterrent, and people then stop taking chances. Yeah.
Do you think people are going to just try and go through the border somewhere else?
No, but that somewhere else is exactly what we call the vulnerable segments. Because remember, as we do static deployments in the identified areas, the SNDF continues to do patrols, meaning when they see a shift from a particular area to another, we also shift. Our deployments, Stephen, are not permanent per se. We deploy as we deal with the activities. Because as you will know, it's like with crime. Once you intensify activities here, they move to the next area. But we have to keep on neutralizing those various areas until we win the war, as it were.
Mr. Commissioner, thank you. Dr. Michael Masiapato is the Commissioner at the Border Management Authority, 17 after 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Mohammed in Cape Town, hi. You want to talk about an airline, Mohammed? What happened?
Hello, Mr. Grootes. How are you?
I'm well. Please call me Stephen. Go for it, Mohammed.
Good, thanks. Basically, Mr. Grootes, we were booked on the SAF Air flight last night at 2040. We had checked in on time and so forth, gone through security, went to the boarding gate, which was closing at 2025. Understand we're traveling with 2 kids. We got there at 2026. We're instructed that the boarding gate was closed. I've never seen this, that a boarding gate is closed within 1 minute. Anyway, saw the bus, that takes you to the plane there, and we instructed the crew. Apparently, Menzies is, assists with that gate control. Basically,
I think they're a contractor, yeah.
Basically, they informed us, no, they can't open. We phone the service, your duty manager, they can override it. We are here. They said, no, we can't do it. We're like, okay, so what must we do? They said, go to the ticketing office. I'm like, then I'll definitely miss the flight. Anyway, a gentleman with a broken leg pitched up after us because he was hassled at security for his electric. He's got a brace on, so they were hassling him. No assistance. Went to the ticketing officer, spoke to the duty manager. They essentially told us, go on standby at your own cost. We can't confirm that you'll get a flight. Now, considering we're both medical doctors and have to be on duty today with 2 kids, we're like, okay, what's your contingency from SAF Air? Oh, no, you stay in the airport on standby. We don't do anything else. We're like, okay. So anyway, Mr. Grootes, I think this is terrible because this has happened to a lot of travelers, apparently. They've been sitting in the airport for 36 hours, 48 hours. And SAF Air's response is just go on standby for 300 Rand. And if you're lucky, you'll get a flight. But we can't promise anything until Wednesday. I actually tweeted you last night. My kids were sleeping on the trolley. We're in the privileged situation where we could book an accommodation, but this is all at our own expense. We've now had to travel separately. My wife's on duty today. She's basically flew down with Cam Air. They were very accommodating, and we'll fly with Lyft in the evening. But there's just no solution, basically, on SAF.
Can I ask, Mohammed? I'm sorry to interrupt you. When you got to the front, right, and was there a bus to go onto the aeroplane?
Yeah. So it wasn't, we walked directly. The bus was there. We told them.
So the bus hadn't left.
Yeah, for 7, the bus left at 33 minutes past 8 in the evening. We were there at 2026, and we pleaded with them, and they were like, no, we can't help you.
And do you
know? And
know?
then when we had spoken to the duty manager, she said, oh, no, they could have called and I could override it, but they didn't. I'm like, but isn't that normal to phone?
And can I ask, do you know, I don't know how you would know, but do you know if the flight that flew was actually full? When the plane flew without you, if it was full?
So we actually asked them, but I know it's confidential, where's the flight manifest? But what I've heard is they attempt to just throwing a lot of people to go through security, wait at the gate, the standby passengers. If you're a bit late and they see the flight is not going to be full, they're just throwing people onto the flights, basically.
Sure. All right. Mohammed, we're going to keep your number if that's all right. We've had one or two issues around that airline before, and maybe we need to follow up on that for tomorrow. Just looking at him, Mdu's nodding. All right, thank you. We'll do that. Mohammed, I'm sorry that happened. No, very disruptive to your family, a difficult situation. Let's hear what the airline has to say for themselves. 21 after 8.
South Africa is facing an increase in people diagnosed with non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, cancers, hypertension, lung problems and obesity. This also increases the number of people living with these diseases and mental health.
Many people living with these preventable diseases may not be immediately aware unless they go for health screening and testing.
It is our responsibility to invest in our healthier future through regular physical activity, healthy diets and avoiding risky health behaviors such as alcohol and tobacco use.
The Department of Health urges people to go for regular health screening for early detection and effective treatment if they are diagnosed with any of these conditions.
This message is brought to you by the National Department of Health.
And we would buy 500 cars, and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price, and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-dun-da-dun-da-dun-da-dun. We buy cars, we buy cars.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
Ready Steady Cook South Africa. The Thriller Minute Daily Treat is sure to spice up your Monday to Friday menu from Monday 18 March at 7 p.m. If you and someone you know think you're ready and steady to cook along the esteemed chefs on this juicy television show, you can WhatsApp the producers on 068 675 2542. Channel your inner five-star chef with Ready Steady Cook. Weekdays at 7 p.m. only on
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
23 after 8, there have been huge issues around water hyacinth and basically a sort of weed that's growing in certain water sources. Been in the situation at Hartbeespoort for a long time now. It's in the Vaal River. Now the Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation is suggesting there should be a national registry of polluters. In other words, if you pollute a waterway, you would go on a registry. Dr. Ferial Adam is a water and climate justice activist and executive manager at Water Can. Dr. Adam, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Thank you for having me, and good morning to your listeners.
Would such a registry, would this be a good idea? Would it make any difference? Would it prevent people from polluting water in the first place?
Well, I think with that registry must be enforcement. So, you can have a registry and everyone knows who's polluting. And I do think that actually we do know who's polluting. But what will be the outcome of that? And that is the important thing. It's not enough to just be on a registry, but you have to be, there's enforcement, pay a fine, go to jail. All of those things must start happening. And then I think it would be a real thing. And if we have a registry, but then keep track of those people, right now, do we even have the ability to do that?
So, around the world, it's often a major problem to try and work out who's polluting rivers and hold people responsible. As far as I know, hardly anyone ever goes to jail for it. And yet people make decisions knowing that this will be the consequence.
Yeah, I think we should be the first to do that. I think we cannot play around with our water anymore. And it mustn't only be private sector that goes to jail and pays fines, and that's not happening enough, but also at municipal level. Not to fine the whole municipality, but to fine the municipal manager in charge.
There was a case last week, I think it was in Mpumalanga, I'd need to check, of a municipality that was fined a huge amount of money for basically pumping raw sewage into rivers.
Correct. It was in Mpumalanga, and we support that kind of, enforcement. The problem, though, is that the fine becomes taxpayers' money. So we start paying for that fine. What we're saying is people must be held accountable, someone must lose their job, and it must be at a management level.
I suppose I can see the sign now. This pollution was brought to you by, and a picture of the person. I would imagine there would be all sorts of consequences to that too, because it can sometimes be difficult to work out who is responsible. So in some cases it's obvious. In the case of raw sewage, you know where it comes from. In the case of water hyacinth, or I forget the name of the weed that we're seeing in water lettuce, you might not know where it actually comes from because it starts as one or two plants and becomes this carpet.
But that's the thing, is that it's been allowed to get so bad that now we can't really ascertain where it comes from. But if we are better with enforcement, and that's the whole thing, we need to be on the ball. We need to be doing it before it becomes the kind of water letters issue in the Vaal or the hyacinth in Hearties. That's taken years to get there. People have noticed this. It wasn't a quick thing. It didn't happen just over a year. The water lettuce, there have been reports of that water lettuce for about 4 or 5 years, and it's just now grown to this extent. So if we on it before it gets to that extent, then you can definitely find out where it's coming from.
Dr. Ferial Adam, thanks very much indeed. Water and climate justice activist and executive manager at Water Can. They're part of OUTA. Really do appreciate the time. Just shows you the difficulty in some of these cases, but also, as I say, around the world, holding people to account for this has been very, very difficult. Coming up now to 27 minutes after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Sharks seem to be on a roll.
Yeah, they're on a roll. It's a frenzy in European rugby, and they are circling the semi-finals. That's in the European Cup Challenge. They are making their mark, and it's the first time a team from South Africa has made it this far in the prestigious tournament. Set to face Clermont at Twickenham on the 4th of May with coach John Plumtree at the helm. The Sharks are looking to bring home more than just pride. They're aiming for a win that will etch their names into the annals of rugby history. Soccer action tonight. The Chelsea boss, Mauricio Pochettino, is unwilling to dwell on the number of injuries in his squad as they look ahead to playing Everton. He seems set to welcome back Ben Chilwell, but Axel Disasi, Enzo Fernandez and Raheem Sterling are all doubts for the fixture.
I'll be honest, it's true that that is a special season for us because we were suffering a lot. But at the moment we need to stop to talk, or I need to stop to talk, because I think people, when it's going, is waiting for me to talk. In the press conference it's always like it's so boring because they know that they're going to talk about that. I need to stop, and we need to adapt. We need to accept the reality, and we need to be positive, and with the players that we have, and with the young kids that came through the academy, we are going to try to be competitive and try to win the game Monday.
Chelsea will take on Everton tonight at 9 p.m. Now, cricket, the Titans opener, Rivaldo Munsami, smashed his way to a big half-century to lead his side to a 8-wicket bonus point win over the Tuskers in their Cricket South Africa T20 Challenge clash took place at Supersport Park in Centurion. Another match saw a disciplined Rocks. They saw them stun the Warriors into a 5-wicket victory. It was a Cricket South Africa T20 Challenge in Paarl, chasing 128 for victory. The Rocks reached the target with 18 balls to spare. Shifting gears now to the high-octane world of motorsport, where Maverick Vinales pulled off a sensational win at the Grand Prix of the Americas, solidifying his position as a MotoGP marvel. With this victory, Vinales becomes the first rider to win with 3 different teams. The race was not without drama, as South Africa's own Brad Binder fought valiantly to claim a top 10 finish, ensuring the South African flag flew high at the circuit. Golf, the world number 1 Scottie Scheffler won his second Masters in 3 years yesterday. Overnight leader Scheffler beat out the impressive Masters debutant Ludwig Aberg by 4 shots for his second green jacket. And closer to home, Jonathan Broomhead has claimed his maiden Sunshine Tour title in the Tour Championship at Serengeti Estates, also wrapping up another thrilling Sunshine Tour season that has opened doors for a new generation of South African stars. In the final tournament of the 2023-2024 season, Broomhead closed with a 69 to win by 2 strokes on 16 under par over Louise Alberta and Rupert Kaminsky. The tournament also finalized the Sunshine Tour Order of Merit, and that was won by Ryan van Velsen, who finished first in a breakthrough season where he won twice. And that's a wrap of your Sport on Sunrise. We'll have more sport on SAFM around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. School leaving certificates, that's next. You're with SAFM leading the conversation, 8:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, with elections just over a month and a half away, President Cyril Ramaphosa says the responsibility to ensure they are a success lies with all members of society. In his letter to the nation today, Ramaphosa says government, political parties, candidates, voters, the media and civil society organizations must play their part by ensuring that both in action and words they inspire faith in the country's democracy. The National Union of Public Service and Allied Workers has criticised the ruling ANC, calling it a government that does not care about its state-owned enterprises and other public entities. The union has expressed outrage over the recent South African Post Office retrenchments. And the South African Students' Congress has called on financial aid scheme NSFAS to centralise regional offices across the country. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
We've been warning you about this. The R21 out of Pretoria to the airport heavier this morning. You might be expecting, I don't know whether it's just a different traffic pattern being a Monday morning or whether there may be an additional lane closure, but that run into the roadworks just before you get to Olifantsfontein Airport bound is a lot heavier than normal. A fresh crash on the Mike 1 at Crown Interchange. Traffic staying heavy on the run from Boysons. And a reminder, if you drive out of Soweto, roadworks up at the Maresburg exit have been left in during rush hour this morning, and that's why it's so heavily backed from a roundabout sort of N17 highway. That's about where you'll pick up that queue. Durban also talk about roadworks left in. The M4 has some lane closures. Southern Freeway this morning at Congella, and that's staying heavy on the run in from the Jacob side. Margate remaining closed. Just put a video up on x.com at Traffic SA. You can have a look at the damage that was sustained in big flooding overnight, and you'll understand why routes in the Margate area are likely to be closed for some time. The major route that's closed is the R620. That's the main road straight through that central Margate area. So there's been some traffic disruption there, but there's fallen trees and flooding and mud debris to watch for in Margate and the surrounding region this morning. Cape Town staying fairly busy. All approaches, really. The highway still a lot of traffic, particularly the N2 inbound from Lunga, the M5 from Kenilworth area, and quite a queue working up the N7 still to a busy Bosmansdam off-ramp. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
27 minutes now to 9. The time for your mediated conversation this Monday morning. Last week on SAFM Sunrise, you heard quite a brief conversation around a plan by the Department of Basic Education to look at introducing or changing the certificate that a person leaving school would get if they do not get a matric. In other words, the idea would be that you get some kind of certificate if you left school at the end of grade 9. That certificate would be something you could show employers or even potential educational institutions to try and get a job and a sustainable income. At the moment, as you know, we spend a huge amount of time focusing on matrics and matric results, but we also know that only around half of the children who enter grade 1 will actually get through to matric. And you've heard many conversations here on SAFM Sunrise about how and why this happens. So then this morning, what is the Department of Basic Education planning? How would it work? Would it make a difference? Or could it potentially create some other problems that we need to be aware of? First this morning, Dr. Moses Simelane is the Chief Director for Curriculum Policy Implementation at the Department of Basic Education. Then Merle Mansfield is the Program Director for the Zero School Dropout Campaign. And Hendrik Makaneta is an education activist and Deputy Chair of the Foundation for Education and Social Justice Africa. We start then with the Chief Director for Curriculum Policy Implementation at the Department of Basic Education, Dr. Moses Simelane. Dr. Simelane, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners, and thank you so much for having us.
Sure. So firstly, at the moment, is the matric certificate the only school leaving certificate you can get? Is that right? It's the only piece of paper you can get from leaving school?
That is true. That is true, Stephen. The National Senior Certificate is the only school leaving certificate that is available from basic education.
So then if a child leaves school earlier than that, I suppose the only proof they have would be, say, a school report or something like that.
Yes, yes and no. But let me then hasten to talk to you about the General Education Certificate, which is being introduced by the Department of Basic Education as an additional qualification within the schooling system that would be available to all learners who complete grade 9. But it is important to note that this qualification is not a school leaving qualification or certificate. The General Education Certificate is being introduced, firstly, to set standards and to actually set benchmarks, to do the benchmarking in terms of education, acquisition, skills, and competencies that learners would have acquired at the end of the general education and training phase, which is the grade 9 level. So this is where the qualification is being introduced, but it is not introduced as a school leaving certificate or qualification. It is introduced as a transitional qualification. I will explain what I mean by that. It's transitional qualification because it is the qualification that will be used based on each individual learner performance at the end of grade 9, looking at how they have performed, and therefore teachers will use the performance of the learners in that qualification to guide them in terms of which stream between the 3 streams that are also introduced together with this qualification. That is the academic stream, the vocational stream, and the occupational stream. And those streams are actually starting from grade 10. And that is why the certificate cannot be an exit certificate or an exit qualification. It is more an access qualification because performance of learners will be utilized to actually guide them as to which stream will be suitable for their future careers, as it were.
Okay, so what you're saying is this certificate is not to say, congratulations, now you can leave school. This certificate is to say, congratulations, now you can continue with school in one of these streams.
Definitely. It is a certificate that will, like I've indicated, maybe let me talk about how will the qualification assessed for or the certificate assessed for at the end of the grade 9 year. It will firstly be the curriculum assessment, which has always been in existence in the sector. But 2, the qualification will also assess for competencies. If we talk competencies, we talk about what each learner can do with the knowledge and skills that they have acquired. Competencies are a practical demonstration of putting knowledge and skills into application in relevant situations. Thirdly, and more importantly, and that is why you cannot talk about the GEC qualification without talking about the 3-stream model. The third assessment that will be carried out for each learner at grade 9 is the assessment for inclination. In this case, learners' interests, aptitudes, and abilities will be evaluated or assessed. And it is on the basis of what learners demonstrate as being their inherent interests and aptitudes and abilities that will be used. That information will then be used to guide learners as to which stream between the academic, the vocational, and the occupational stream will be suited for their future careers.
Okay, would you get, so this would be, would it count as a qualification? Would it be a certificate or something? How would that work? Would it be something that comes, so if I remember correctly, a matric certificate will come sort of from a department, it won't come from the school. Where would it come from?
This qualification, just like the National Senior Certificate, is also going to be it will be provided for, or it will be issued by umalusi. But in terms of the modalities about which the qualification will be issued or the certification will be provided, this is something that is still being in discussion between basic education and umalusi. But firstly, umalusi will quality assure the qualification, the offering of the qualification, and it will also process it's issuing to learners who have met the promotion and progression requirements.
Okay.
At the end of the grade 9, yeah.
Okay. So this is part of a much bigger change then. How long do you think it'll be? I mean, what cohort do you think would be the first to get this? Are we talking 5 years? Are we talking next year?
We actually, according to the plan that we have in place to implement the qualification, we are looking at the beginning of 2025. That's the first year during which this qualification is going to be assessed for and, of course, issued to the qualifying learners. Maybe let me quickly indicate that we have been piloting this GEC from 2022, and we started with 277 schools. And then in 2023, we increased the number of schools piloting the GEC to 1,000. This year, which is the final year of piloting the qualification, we are increasing the number of schools to 3,000.
Okay. Could there be an unfortunate consequence where children actually see this, learners see this as the end goal to get this certificate, to get this qualification, rather than to continue? You were correct to sort of almost correct me in what I was saying, and I had misunderstood it. I worry that other people might misunderstand it too.
Look, Stephen, I think, well, there could be possibilities of unintended consequences of introducing this, but these will be reduced to a minimum. And in fact, the fact that we have been piloting this qualification from 2022 across schools, across the 9 provinces, that in itself was indirectly a way of advocating for the qualification for what it is or what it is not. So as we speak, I think there is growing knowledge and understanding of what the qualification.
Oh dear, we seem to have lost the line there for Dr. Moses Simelane. Not entirely sure what happened. I think we can probably move on, actually. So, Dr. Moses Simelane, my apologies to you, but I think we had got most of the answers that we needed. Chief Director for Curriculum Policy Implementation at the Department of Basic Education. You're with SFM. 17 minutes now to 9. The time your mediated conversation around this new certificate continues. Merle Mansfield is the Program Director for at the Zero School Dropout Campaign. Merle, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning to your listeners.
How do you view this? On the one side, there is the obvious idea that children would start to move into streams, and this would be basically saying you can now move into a particular stream that will suit your interests and your inherent abilities. Do you think this might help to keep children in school for longer?
Well, I definitely think it depends on how that's going to be implemented. I think that we've welcomed the idea that the GEC gives more learners the opportunity to choose what potentially suits their capacity or ability and even their interests. But I worry about the ability of schools and even the post-school institution kind of environment to absorb those learners. So are schools going to be retaining all learners that perhaps from the GEC are identified as being better suited to occupational or vocational training? And will those subjects be supplied within the schooling environments that they are in? Or are learners going to be opting into transition into FET institutions like TVET colleges, for example? You know, what does that look like? And what is the mechanism to support learners through that journey? We know, for example, that currently most of our learners, in fact, 80% of the population of our public school are no-fee and low-fee schools, meaning that their studies are subsidized. So should learners then be opting into, occupational or vocational training institutions? What does that resources look like? What does that support look like? If it is available in the communities that these learners are.
So there's a risk that some of the learners who may, I'm not quite sure what these phrases are going to be called, what these streams will be called yet, but some learners might be kept in the system because they're seen as academic or whatever the phrase may be, and some, just through the stream that they opt for, will almost be left by the wayside.
Exactly, and I think even if the stream is made possible within the schools that they are in, I don't know how likely it is that by 2025 we'd be able to support the cohort of learners, for example, that would need to go into those streams. So I would have really loved Dr. Similani to share some of the findings of the pilot, because we've been struggling to get a report on, any of those findings up until now. We know that the department has been running this pilot. They've spoken about that quite extensively, but the results of that pilot hasn't been made available to us. I think one of the things we want to caution against as the Zero Dropout campaign is that we don't amplify disengagement. So if a learner gets this result and it confirms to them that they don't have the capacity to complete an academic stream, how that is relayed to a learner and how that is managed is critically important to ensure that they don't disengage from the schooling system entirely. We already see from our trends currently that repetition and dropout, grade repetition and dropout are terrible twins. And essentially in grade 10, when repetition peaks, so does dropout. And so I think it's critically important that however these, results are used in a transitionary manner even, that transition is very intentionally managed and that learners understand where the opportunities and resources will come from within their communities, within their schools, to be able to complete the streams in which they identified for.
At the moment, as I understand the law, you might know it better than I do, we have what's called universal compulsory education. You have to be in school until the end of grade 9 or until 15. Would changing the law to say you have to stay in school until you're 16 or 17 or 18 make any difference whatsoever?
I think it's very important that we all consider basic education is until grade 12. Typically because currently we can see even within our TVET environment, which is an FET stage, only about 1% of people in TVET colleges don't have a matric certificate. Secondly, because we know from the population of learners or young people in our country that are not in education, employment or training, nearly 50% of them don't have a matric certificate. So we don't have a post-school environment that is sympathetic to young people who don't have a matric certificate. So the law currently allows learners to exit school in grade 9 or 16, whichever comes first. And, because compulsory schooling ends in grade 9. And so I think it's really important that we start motivating for the completion of school, whether that is in an FET setting or within a schooling environment. But we know that learners who don't have, a qualification beyond NQF1, which is what grade 9 is, have a very, very limited chance of accessing pathways to productivity in any form or shape.
One of the things we know is around the world you need more and more education to get a job. And it would seem in a way that this is one of the problems that we face, that our young people need more and more of an education, or more and more education, I should say, to get a job. And yet we have faced this huge problem of so many people leaving school with almost no education. We need to do anything we can to make sure they stay in that education. For some children, having a stream that is more attractive to them, could that work the other way and keep them in school for longer? Because they might think, well, I'm good with X, Y, and Z. These are seen as occupational things, but there is space for me, so I'm going to stay, rather than the syllabus, which is often seen, I think, as too academic for other children, and so they sort of drop out. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that if this is done correctly, could it have the consequence of keeping more children in school for longer?
Absolutely, and that's the hopeful part about this shift in policy and the certificate, right? It's that we're actually going to be focusing on individual learner needs, which I think is critically important within our system, and thinking about how we position young people to choose their livelihoods, to be active participants in what they're wanting to do, envisioning their future, and not just having one kind of compulsory mechanism to exit school. I think that's amazing, that hope exists and that we're able to do that. But again, it will depend on the environment in which this is implemented. So employers, the labor market, post-school opportunities, learnerships. Currently, most of these minimum requirements are set at having a matric certificate. It's favored as the only signaling tool to many that this learner has the competencies to be able, to complete something or to be successful in that opportunity. And so I think it's going to take a lot of work and coordination between DBE as well as DHET, to really ensure that we're able to track this process and that it is being implemented in the way that is actually benefiting young people and not increasing their kind of feelings of hopelessness within the system, because it has the potential to do that as well.
Thank you very much indeed. Mel Mansfield is the Programme Director for the Zero School Dropout campaign. In a moment, the education activist Hendrik Makaneta. You're with SAFM, 10 minutes to 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still very busy around Joburg's Crown Interchange this morning. A crash on the northbound side just through the interchange means the M2 coming through from Joe Slovo downtown into the Crown stays heavy as well. A lot of traffic on the M1 option from Allendale down to about Marlborough Drive before you're out of that. And the R21 queuing both ways just north of Olifantsfontein. The lane closure southbound, the sinkhole northbound. It has been a very busy Monday morning through there. Margate remains heavily restricted, particularly the 620, the main road through Margate, probably will be restricted for some time because of significant wash away last night. There has been a bit of traffic congestion, particularly at the top end of that closure around Bank Road or Bank Street. Sort of traffic having to divert to the sort of narrower Marine Drive option. A lot of traffic congestion in and around Margate as a result of that. Durban side picking up quite a heavy delay on the R102. This is a crash coming into, it's between Palmview and Phoenix. So the R102 just very heavy coming south and going north. So if you're driving Verulam Phoenix, factor in some delay time to get through there. Cape Town, very slow around the Sandrift and Century City areas this morning. Umurumba Road through Bosmansdam on towards Rotanga Road into Century City's heavy, and Bosmansdam Road backing up westbound into that. The N7 north to Bosmansdam stays pretty busy as well, and a lot of traffic congestion on the main road, southbound through Cork Bay, southbound down through Caveli, and then if you're driving northbound out of Fish, you could crash at Duval Road on the main road, so that's quite heavy, and then you're into that secondary queue up towards Claveli traffic lights. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
8 minutes to 9. The time. Continue a mediated conversation around the new plan to essentially give learners a qualification at the end of grade 9 before they go into certain streams. Hendrik Makaneta is an education activist and deputy chair of the Foundation for Education and Social Justice Africa. Hendrik, good morning.
Good morning. And good morning to the listeners as well.
Do you think grade 9, so 14 for many learners, is that the right age to make a kind of decision about the future of a learner? I always worry that that's too young, but I know many countries actually make decisions like that for learners at an even younger age.
Well, for our context in South Africa, grade 9 learners are very young. Most of them or some of them are in the age of 14 years. They are 14 years old or even 13 years old. And so to come up with a certificate for grade 9, that kind of a certificate will not help the learners in any way. It will not be able to help them. In fact, if anything, the certificate will help the minister and the department to be able to account for dropout rates that we currently experience. Because at the moment, there's a high level of dropout rates in the system. That is why learners who start in grade 1, by the time they reach grade 12, not all of them are able to sit for the National Senior Certificate exams. And so the formalizing the General Education Certificate will help the minister because at least for the first time, the minister can be able to account and say all of these learners have reached, grade 9, and there will be a certificate to prove that they exited the system at that level. And so the dropout rates will be reduced in that sense.
I mean, as I understand what the department's trying to do, they're trying to keep children in school for longer. Are there other ways they could do this? I mean, will the streaming system make a difference in that way?
Well, it is one thing to keep learners at school for long, but it is also another to provide quality education that can lead to skills, so that when learners receive any form of certificate, in this case the National Senior Certificate, they should be able to do so or to exit the system with the skills that can be able to help them in the mainstream economy. And currently that is not the case. Yes, I know there have been a lot of developments with regards to progression policies, with regards to lowering the standard, just to make sure that we accommodate learners so that we keep them in the system. Because it is true that, in the olden days, not all learners were able to be in the system for long. because of the academic standard that was provided in the past, whereby you needed in the main 50% to pass most of your subjects. And so we think that we must be able to balance quality with quantity. There is no point in trying to make sure that everyone gets a certificate when that certificate is not qualitative.
Are there, I do want to put the question to you that I put to Merle Mansfield earlier. Would changing the law make any difference, forcing children to stay in school, say, to 16 or to 17?
Definitely. I think that, once you change the law, that can actually help. Because currently, only grade 1. Already, the exit system is grade 9. Even apart from the certificate, we know that schooling in South Africa, basic education is compulsory from grade 1 up until grade 9. And of course, that right now the Basic Education Law Amendment Bill is going to ensure that even grade R becomes compulsory, which means that schooling will be compulsory from grade R right up to grade 9. But I think that we need a situation whereby we can be able to not set up the learners for failure. We must be able to improve our education system, modernize it in such a way that it can prepare learners for the future as well. Because most of the jobs that exist today will become obsolete in the near future, and there is no doubt that we might the unemployment rate that affects mainly young people might increase from the level of 6% where it is currently, to a much bigger level. So we must be able to modernize our education system with a view to ensuring that it prepares all our learners for the future. And it will be nice if learners can stay in the system until they finish grade 12. Because the grade 9 certificate is simply not going to help them.
Isn't choice part of that? If you give children, learners at the age of 14, a choice around what they're going to do, won't that actually keep them in harder for longer? If you had told me I had to do a higher grade trigonometry, I probably would have tried to leave school as early as I could. And the point I'm trying to get to, Hendrik, is that the more choice, the better. And isn't that part of that? Isn't this part of that process, to give learners a bit more choice?
Already they have it. Right now, grade 9 learners who leave school can still go into a TVET college and pursue vocational studies. They did not really need a formal certificate to do that. They are able to go and pursue other interests, without the certificate. I get a sense that we are lowering the bar, just by introducing a grade 9 certificate. I think that I could be speaking a different story if we were introducing another certificate post grade 12. I think that would be something that I would align myself with.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Hendrik Makaneta. Appreciate the time. Education activist and Deputy Chair of the Foundation for Education and Social Justice Africa. So interesting to hear different views, of course, on this. My thanks also to Merle Mansfield, the Program Director at Zero School Dropout. And starting us off today, Dr. Moses Simelane is the Chief Director for Curriculum Policy Implementation at the Department of Basic Education. My thanks very much indeed for that mediated conversation around some changes we're seeing to the qualifications.
The Saturday.
She said, Simon, that she feels sorry for me. And come to think of it, I've always made people feel sorry for me so that they could give me what I wanted. But when she said those words, I'm telling you, Simon, it was the most painful thing anyone has ever said to me.
Catch me, Lerato Velase, on the Saturday play between 9 and 10 p.m.
I think this is your fault.
Come on, Tato.
Yes, it is your fault, Ray.
I can't take this.
You told the court that you would provide Mpho with everything that she needed. You said I was unfit, an unfit mother. Now you want me to be a part of this mess?
Catch the Saturday play between 9 and 10 p.m. only on SAFM.
You're with SAFM. Thank you very much indeed for being with us this morning. From Mdu, Stanza, Melissa, myself, look after yourself. You're with SAFM, leading the conversation, 9 o'clock.
As various sectors of society urge to ensure elections are free, and G7 leaders condemns Iran's attack on Israel. Good morning. We start with election news. With elections just over a month and a half away, President Cyril Ramaphosa says the responsibility to ensure they are a success lies with all members of society. In his letter to the nation today, Ramaphosa says government, political parties, candidates, voters, the media and civil society organizations must play their part by ensuring that both in action and words they inspire faith in the country's democracy. He says these sectors of society must ensure the elections take place in a climate free of intimidation and all forms of violence. Busi Chimombe reports.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says South Africa's democracy is in good health. The country ranks third on the continent with regards to perceptions of electoral integrity, with dire predictions of violence and democratic backsliding having been proven wrong time and time again. He urges that citizens ensure that the upcoming elections be yet another affirmation of the strength of the country's constitutional order, its institutions and democracy.
The National Union of Public Service and Allied Workers has criticized the ruling ANC, calling it a government that does not care about its state-owned enterprises and other public entities. The union has expressed outrage over the recent South African Post Office retrenchments. About 4,700 retrenchment letters have been issued and sent to workers by the Post Office. According to the Minister Mondli Gungubele, about 235 post offices are set to close across the country. The union's General Secretary Soli Malima says they believe the retrenchments could be prevented.
In our view, post office can be saved, and what is happening in all state-owned enterprises is deliberate so that they are privatized. So you need people who are capable, who have skills to run the organization. The unemployment has reached unprecedented levels in the country, and instead of for this governing party creating jobs, they are destroying jobs. And this useless minister coming to say we must praise him for putting the post office under business rescue. For what? When he's sending 5,000 people home to starve.
The South African Students' Congress, SASCO, has called on financial aid scheme NSFAS to centralize regional offices across the country. It believes this will help students with inquiries to go directly to their offices. Briefing the media in Pretoria, the Higher Education Minister Blade Nzimande said the inability of the outgoing NSFAS board to carry out its basic responsibilities form part of the main reasons for the dissolution of the board. SASCO President Vezintlanhla Simelane says the problem at NSFAS is systemic.
There are many challenges, current issues of appeal at NSFAS. Many of our students, their issues are not resolved. They don't have NSFAS, but they do qualify for NSFAS. So there are many challenges, and we believe that the issue must not only be the one of the board, but also even at the level of management. We believe that there are challenges and intervention is needed, especially by the newly appointed administrator.
The Alexander Taxi Association, or ATA, together with Alexander, Randburg, Midrand and Sandton Taxi Association, AMSTA, are this morning conducting a crime prevention and patrolling operation at the MTN taxi rank in the Johannesburg CBD in an effort to clear their taxi rank from crime in the city. The associations are working together with the Johannesburg Metro Police Department and SAPS. Spokesperson for AMSTA, Tladi Lipolisa, says their passengers are mugged on a daily basis, which sometimes scares commuters to use public transport.
We're having an operation, a clean-up operation. We've got a high crime rate in our taxi ranks. Our passengers are no longer safe, so that's why we took this initiative that we need to do a clean-up. Okay, we've got drug addicts, drug dealers, and people who are selling this illegal alcohol. Our customers are being marked on a daily basis. So most of them, they don't prefer going to the taxi rank anymore, and it does affect us negatively.
And finally, G7 leaders have condemned in the strongest terms what a statement describes as Iran's direct and unprecedented attack against Israel. Showan Price Peace reports from New York that the G7 has expressed its full solidarity and support to Israel, reaffirming its commitment towards Israel's security.
G7 leaders also say Iran has further stepped towards the destabilization of the region and risked provoking an uncontrollable escalation, calling for this to be avoided. The group pledged to continue to work to stabilize the situation and avoid further escalation. They demanded that in that spirit Iran and its proxies cease their attacks and that the G7 stood ready to take further measures now and in response to further destabilizing initiatives. The group says it will strengthen cooperation to end the crisis in Gaza, including towards an immediate and sustainable ceasefire, the release of the hostages, and increased humanitarian aid.
Recapping the top story, with elections just over a month and a half away, President Cyril Ramaphosa says the responsibility to ensure they are a success lies with all members of society. For SFM News, I am Anne Musa.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 104.6 FM in Tshwane.
SAFM supports a litter-free South Africa. Play your part in keeping our surroundings and environment clean. SAFM, leading the conversation.
If you're active on social media and love SAFM, we hope you'll take a moment to like or follow our SAFM page on Facebook and Twitter. These are the best places to find all the guest information, conversations, and stories you love from your favorite presenters, along with regular updates from SABC News. And don't forget, you can send your questions to feedback@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversation.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda.